Mom, I thought. She released the kite. It rose a foot or two, wagged naughtily from side to side, then took a dive into the sand. The breeze kicked up, and it went skittering. She had to chase it down. "Once more," Mike called. "That time—" Cough, 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 harsh and bronchial. "That time you almost had it." "No, I didn't." She sounded tired and pissed off. "Goddamn thing hates me. Let's go in and get some sup." Milo was sitting beside Mike's wheelchair, watching the evening's activities with bright eyes. When he saw me, he was off like a shot, barking. As I watched him come, I remembered Madame Fortuna's pronouncement on the day I first met her. "In your future is a little girl and a little boy. The boy has a dog." "Milo, come back!" Mom shouted. Her hair had probably started that evening tied up, but after several experiments in aviation it hung around her face in strings. She pushed it away wearily with the backs of her hands. Milo paid no attention. He skidded to a stop in front of me with his front paws spraying sand and did his sitting-up thing. I laughed and patted his head. "It's all you get, pal. No croissants tonight." He barked at me once, then trotted back to Mom, who was standing ankle-deep in the sand, breathing hard and eyeing me with mistrust. The captured kite hung down by her leg. "See?" she said. "That's why I didn't want you to feed him. He's a terrible beggar, and he thinks anybody who gives him a scrap is his friend." "Well, I'm a friendly sort of guy." "Good to know," she said. "Just don't feed our dog anymore." She was wearing pedal pushers and an old blue t-shirt with faded printing on the front. Judging from the sweat stains on it, she had been trying to get the kite airborne for quite some time. Trying hard, and why not? If I had a kid stuck in a wheelchair, I'd probably want to give him something that would fly too. "You're going the wrong way with that thing," I said. "And you don't need to run with it anyway. I don't know why everybody thinks that." "I'm sure you're quite the expert," she said, "but it's late and I have to get Mike his supper." "Mom, let him try," Mike said. "Please?" She stood for a few more seconds with her head lowered and escaped locks of her hair, also sweaty, clumped against her neck. Then she sighed and held the kite out to me. Now I could read the printing on her shirt. Camp Perry Match Competition, Prone, 1959. The front of the kite was a lot better, and I had to laugh. It was the face of Jesus. "Private joke," she said. "Don't ask." "Okay." "You get one try, Mr. Joyland, and then I'm taking him in for his supper. He can't get chilled. He was sick last year, and he still hasn't gotten over it. He thinks he has, but he hasn't." It was still at least 75 on the beach, but I didn't point this out. Mom was clearly not in the mood for further contradictions. Instead, I told her again that my name was Devin Jones. She raised her hands and let them flop. "Whatever you say, Bob." I looked at the boy. "Mike?" "Yes?" "Reel in the string. I'll tell you when to stop." He did as I asked. I followed, and when I was even with where he sat, I looked at Jesus. "Are you going to fly this time, Mr. Christ?" Mike laughed. Mom didn't, but I thought I saw her lips twitch. "He says he is," I told Mike. "Good, because—" Cough, 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 cough. She was right. He wasn't over it, whatever it was. "Because so far he hasn't done anything but eat sand." I held the kite over my head, but facing Heaven's Bay. I could feel the wind tug at it right away. The plastic rippled. "I'm going to let it go, Mike, when I do start reeling in the string again." "But it'll just—" "No, it won't, just. But you have to be quick and careful." I was making it sound harder than it was because I wanted him to feel cool and capable when the kite went up. It would, too, as long as the breeze didn't die on us. I really hoped that it wouldn't happen because I thought Mom had meant what she said about me getting only one chance. "The kite will rise. When it does, start paying out the twine again. Just keep it taut, okay? That means if it starts to dip, I pull it in some more. I get it. God's sake." "Okay. Ready?" "Yeah." Milo sat between Mom and me, looking up at the kite. "Okay, then. 3, 2, 1. Lift off!" The kid was hunched over in his chair, and the legs beneath his shorts were wasted, but there was nothing wrong with his hands, and he knew how to follow orders. He started reeling in, and the kite rose at once. He began to pay the string out, at first too much, and the kite sagged, but he corrected, and it started going up again. He laughed. "I can feel it. I can feel it in my hands." "That's the wind you feel," I said. "Keep going, Mike. Once it gets up a little higher, the wind will own it." Then all you have to do is not let go." He let out the twine and the kite climbed, first over the beach, then above the ocean, riding higher and higher into that September day's late blue. I watched it a while, then chanced looking at the woman. She didn't bristle at my gaze, because she didn't see it. All her attention was focused on her son. I don't think I ever saw such love and such happiness on a person's face, because he was happy. His eyes were shining and the coughing had stopped. "Mommy, it feels like it's alive." It is, I thought, remembering how my father had taught me to fly a kite in the town park. I had been Mike's age, but with good legs to stand on. As long as it's up there where it was made to be, it really is. "Come and feel it." She walked up the little slope of beach to the boardwalk and stood beside him. She was looking at the kite, but her hand was stroking his cap of dark brown hair. "Are you sure, honey? It's your kite." "Yeah, but you have to try it. It's incredible." She took the reel, which had thinned considerably as the twine paid out and the kite rose. It was now just a black diamond, the face of Jesus no longer visible, and held it out in front of her. For a moment she looked apprehensive. Then she smiled. When a gust tugged the kite, making it wag first to port and then to starboard above the incoming waves, the smile widened into a grin. After she'd flown it for a while, Mike said, "Let him." "No, that's okay," I said. But she held out the reel. "We insist, Mr. Jones. You're the flight master, after all." So I took the twine and felt the old familiar thrill. It tugged the way a fishing line does when a fair-sized trout has taken the hook. But the nice thing about kite flying is nothing gets killed. "How high will it go?" Mike asked. "I don't know, but maybe it shouldn't go much higher tonight. The wind up there is stronger and it might rip it. Also, you guys need to eat." "Can Mr. Jones eat supper with us, Mom?" She looked startled at the idea, not in a good way. Still, I saw she was going to agree because I had gotten the kite up. "That's okay," I said. "I appreciate the invitation, but it was quite a day at the park. We're battening down the hatches for winter, and I'm dirt from head to toe." "You can wash up in the house," Mike said. "We've got like 70 bathrooms. Michael Ross, we do not." "Maybe 75 with a jacuzzi in each one?" He started laughing. It was a lovely infectious sound, at least until it turned to coughing. The coughing became whooping, then just as Mom was starting to look really concerned, I was already there. He got it under control. "Another time," I said, and handed him the reel of twine. "I love your Christ kite. Your dog ain't bad either." I bent and patted Milo's head. "Oh, okay. Another time. But don't wait too long because—" Mom interposed hastily. "Can you go to work a little earlier tomorrow, Mr. Jones?" "Sure, I guess." "We could have fruit smoothies right here, if the weather's nice. I make a mean fruit smoothie." I bet she did, and that way she wouldn't have to have a strange man in the house. "Will you?" Mike asked. "That'd be cool." "I'd love to. I'll bring a bag of pastries from Betty's." "Oh, you don't have to," she began. "My pleasure, ma'am." "Oh," she looked startled. "I never introduced myself, did I?" "I'm Ann Ross." She held out her hand. I'd shake it, Mrs. Ross, but I really am filthy. I showed her my hands. It's probably on the kite, too. "You should have given Jesus a mustache," Mike shouted and then laughed himself into another coughing fit. "You're getting a little loose with the twine there, Mike," I said. "Better reel it in." And as he started doing it, I gave Milo a farewell pat and started back down the beach. "Mr. Jones?" she called. I turned back. She was standing straight with her chin raised. Sweat had molded the shirt to her, and she had great breasts. "It's Miss Ross, but since I guess we've now been properly introduced, why don't you call me Annie?" "I can do that." I pointed at her shirt. "What's a match competition, and why is it prone?" "That's when you shoot lying down," Mike said, and mimed a rifle. "Haven't done it in ages," she said in a curt tone that suggested she wanted the subject closed. "Fine with me." I tipped Mike a wave, and he sent one right back. He was grinning. Kid had a great grin. 40 or 50 yards down the beach, I turned around for another look. The kite was descending, but for the time being, the wind still owned it. They were looking up at it, the woman with her hand on her son's shoulder. "Miss," I thought. "Miss. Not Mrs. And is there a mister with them in the big old Victorian with the 70 bathrooms? Just because I'd never seen one with them didn't mean there wasn't one. But I didn't think so. I thought it was just the two of them, on their own. I got no clarification from Annie Ross the next morning, but plenty of dish from Mike. I also got one hell of a nice fruit smoothie. She said she made the yogurt herself, and it was layered with fresh strawberries from God knows where. I brought croissants and blueberry muffins from Betty's bakery. Mike skipped the pastries but finished his smoothie and asked for another. From the way his mother's mouth dropped open, I gathered that this was an astounding development, but not, I guessed, in a bad way. Are you sure you can eat another one? Maybe just half, he said. What's the deal, Mom? You're the one who says fresh yogurt helps me move my bowels. I don't think we need to discuss your bowels at 7 in the morning, Mike. She got up, then cast a doubtful glance my way. Don't worry, Mike said brightly. If he tries to kitty fiddle me, I'll tell Milo to sick him. Color bloomed in her cheeks. Michael Everett Ross. Sorry, he said. He didn't look sorry. His eyes were sparkling. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to Mr. Jones. Accepted. Will you keep an eye on him, Mr. Jones? I won't be long. I will if you call me Devin. Then I'll do that. She hurried up the boardwalk, pausing once to look over her shoulder. I think she had more than a half a mind to come back, but in the end, the prospect of stuffing a few more healthy calories into her painfully thin boy was too much for her to resist, and she went on. Mike watched her climb the steps of the back patio and sighed. Now I'll have to eat it. Well, yeah, you asked for it, right? Only so I could talk to you without her butting in. I mean, I love her and all, but she's always butting in. Like, what's wrong with me is this big shameful secret we have to keep. He shrugged. I've got muscular dystrophy, that's all. That's why I'm in the wheelchair. I can walk, but the braces and crutches are a pain in the butt. I'm sorry, I said. That stinks, Mike. I guess, but I can't remember not having it. So what the hell? Only it's a special kind of MD. Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, it's called. Most kids who have it croak in their teens or early 20s. So you tell me, what do you say to a 10-year-old kid who's just told you he's living under a death sentence? But, he raised a teacherly finger, remember her talking about how sick I was last year? Mike, you don't have to tell me all this if you don't want to. Yeah, except I do. He was looking at me with clear intensity, maybe even urgency. Because you want to know. Maybe you even need to know. I was thinking of Fortuna again. 2 children, she had told me. A girl in a red hat and a boy with a dog. She said one of them had the sight, but she didn't know which. I thought that now I did. Mom said I think I got over it. Do I sound like I got over it? Nasty cough, I ventured. But otherwise, I couldn't think how to finish. Otherwise your legs are nothing but sticks. Otherwise you look like your mom and I could tie a string to the back of your shirt and fly you like a kite. Otherwise, if I had to bet on whether you or Milo would live longer, I'd put my money on the dog. I came down with pneumonia just after Thanksgiving, okay? When I didn't improve after a couple of weeks in the hospital, the doctor told my mom I was probably going to die, and she ought to, get ready for that. But he didn't tell her in your hearing, I thought. They'd never have a conversation like that in your hearing. I hung in, though. He said this with some pride. My grandfather called my mom. I think it was the first time they'd talked in a long time. I don't know who told him what was going on, but he has people everywhere. Could have been any of them. People everywhere sounded kind of paranoid, but I kept my mouth shut. Later I found that it wasn't paranoid at all. Mike's grandfather did have them everywhere, and they all saluted Jesus, the flag, and the NRA, although possibly not in that order. Grandpa said I got over the pneumonia because of God's will. Mom said he was full of bullshit, just like when he said me having DMD in the first place was God's punishment. She said I was just one tough little son of a bitch, and God had nothing to do with it. Then she hung up on him. Mike might have heard her end of the conversation, but not Grandpa's. And I doubted like hell if his mother had told him. I didn't think he was making it up, though. I found myself hoping Annie wouldn't hurry back. This wasn't like listening to Madame Fortuna. What she had, I believed, and still do all these years later, was some small bit of authentic psychic ability, amped up by a shrewd understanding of human nature and then packaged in glittering, carny bullshit. Mike's thing was clearer, simpler, purer. It wasn't like seeing the ghost of Linda Gray, but it was akin to that, okay? It was touching another world. Mom said she'd never come back here, but here we are. Because I wanted to come to the beach, and because I wanted to fly a kite, and because I'm never going to make 12, let alone my early 20s. It was pneumonia, see? I get steroids and they help, but the pneumonia combined with the Duchenne's MD fucked up my lungs and heart permanently. He looked at me with a child's defiance, watching for how I'd react to what is now so coyly referred to as the F-bomb. I didn't react, of course. I was too busy processing the sense to worry about his choice of words. "So," I said, "I guess what you're saying is an extra fruit smoothie won't help." He threw back his head and laughed. The laughter turned into the worst coughing fit yet. Alarmed, I went to him and pounded his back, but gently. It felt as if there was nothing under there but chicken bones. Milo barked once and put his paw up on one of Mike's wasted legs. There were 2 pitchers on the table, water in one and fresh squeezed orange juice in the other. Mike pointed to the water, and I poured him half a glass. When I tried to hold it for him, he gave me an impatient look, even with his coughing fit still racking him, and took it himself. He spilled some on his shirt, but most of it went down his throat, and the coughing eased. "That was a bad one," he said, patting his chest. "My heart's going like a bastard. Don't tell my mother." "Jesus, kid, like she doesn't know." "She knows too much. That's what I think," Mike said. "She knows I might have 3 more good months and then 4 or 5 really bad ones, like in bed all the time, not able to do anything but suck oxygen and watch MASH and Fat Albert. The only question is whether or not she'll let Grammy and Grandpa Ross come to the funeral." He'd coughed hard enough to make his eyes water, but I didn't mistake that for tears. He was bleak, but in control. Last evening when the kite went up and he felt it tugging the twine, he had been younger than his age. Now, I was watching him struggle to be a lot older. The scary thing was how well he was succeeding. His eyes met mine dead on. "She knows. She just doesn't know that I know." The back door banged. We looked and saw Annie crossing the patio, heading for the boardwalk. "Why would I need to know, Mike?" He shook his head. "I don't have any idea, but you can't talk about it to Mom, okay? It just upsets her. I'm all she's got." He said his last not with pride, but with a kind of gloomy realism. "All right. Oh, one other thing, I almost forgot." He shot a glance at her, saw she was only halfway down the boardwalk, and turned back to me. "It's not white." "What's not white?" Mike Ross looked mystified. "No idea. When I woke up this morning, I remembered you were coming for smoothies, and that came into my head. I thought you'd know." Annie arrived. She had poured a mini smoothie into a juice glass. On top was a single strawberry. "Yum," Mike said. "Thanks, Mom." "You're very welcome, hon." She eyed his wet shirt but didn't mention it. When she asked me if I wanted some more juice, Mike winked at me. I said more juice would be great. While she poured, Mike fed Milo 2 heaping spoonfuls of his smoothie. She turned back to him and looked at the smoothie glass, now half empty. "Wow, you really were hungry." "Told you." "What were you and Mr. Jones, Devin, talking about?" "Nothing much," Mike said. "He's been sad, but he's better now." I said nothing, but I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. When I dared to look at Annie, she was smiling. "Welcome to Mike's world, Devin," she said, and I must have looked like I'd swallowed a goldfish because she burst out laughing. It was a nice sound. That evening, when I walked back from Joyland, she was standing at the end of the boardwalk waiting for me. It was the first time I had seen her in a blouse and skirt, and she was alone. That was the first, too. "Devin, got a second?" "Sure," I said, angling up the sandy slope to her. "Where's Mike?" "He has physical therapy 3 times a week. Usually Janice, she's his therapist, comes in the morning, but I arranged for her to come this evening instead because I wanted to speak to you alone." "Does Mike know that?" Annie smiled ruefully. "Probably. Mike knows far more than he should. I won't ask what you 2 talked about after he got rid of me this morning, but I'm guessing that his insights come as no surprise to you." "He told me why he's in a wheelchair, that's all. And he mentioned he had pneumonia last Thanksgiving." "I wanted to thank you for the kite, Dev. My son has very restless nights. He's not in pain exactly, but he has trouble breathing when he's asleep. It's like apnea. He has to sleep in a semi-sitting position, and that doesn't help. Sometimes he stops breathing completely, and when he does, an alarm goes off and wakes him up. Only last night after the kite, he slept right through. I even went in once around 2 a.m. to make sure the monitor wasn't malfunctioning. He was sleeping like a dream. No restless tossing and turning, no nightmares, he's prone to them, and no moaning. It was the kite. It satisfied him in a way nothing else possibly could, except maybe going to that damned amusement park of yours, which is completely out of the question." She stopped and then smiled. Oh, shit. I'm making a speech. It's all right, I said. It's just that I've had so few people to talk to. I have housekeeping help, a very nice woman from Heaven's Bay, and of course there's Janice, but it's not the same. She took a deep breath. Here's the other part. I was rude to you on several occasions and with no cause. I'm sorry. Ms. Shit. Annie, you don't have anything to apologize for. Yes, I do. You could have just walked on when you saw me struggling with the kite, and then Mike wouldn't have gotten that good night's rest. All I can say is that I have problems trusting people. This is where she invites me in for supper, I thought. But she didn't. Maybe because of what I said next. You know, he could come to the park. It'd be easy to arrange, and with it closed and all, he could have the run of the place. Her face closed up hard, like a hand into a fist. Oh, no, absolutely not. If you think that, he didn't tell you as much about his condition as I thought he did. Please don't mention it to him. In fact, I have to insist. All right, I said, but if you change your mind... I trailed off. She wasn't going to change her mind. She looked at her watch, and a new smile lit her face. It was so brilliant you could almost overlook how it never reached her eyes. Oh, boy, look how late it's getting. Mike will be hungry after his PE, and I haven't done a thing about supper. Will you excuse me? Sure. I stood there watching her hurry back down the boardwalk to the Green Victorian, the one I was probably never going to see the inside of, thanks to my big mouth. But the idea of taking Mike through Joyland had seemed so right. During the summer, we had groups of kids with all sorts of problems and disabilities. Crippled kids, blind kids, cancer kids, kids who were mentally challenged, what we called retarded back in the unenlightened 70s. It wasn't as though I expected to stick Mike in the front car of the delirium shaker and then blast him off, even if the shaker hadn't been buttoned up for the winter. I'm not a total idiot. But the merry-go-round was still operational, and surely he could ride that. Ditto the train that ran through the Wiggle-Waggle Village. I was sure Fred Dean wouldn't mind me touring the kid through Mysterio's Mirror Mansion either, but no. No. He was her delicate hothouse flower, and she intended to keep it that way. The thing with the kite had just been an aberration, and the apology, a bitter pill she felt she had to swallow. Still, I couldn't help admiring how quick and lithe she was, moving with a grace her son would never know. I watched her bare legs under the hem of her skirt and thought about Wendy Keegan not at all. I had the weekend free, and you know what happened. I guess the idea that it always rains on the weekends must be an illusion, but it sure doesn't seem like one. Ask any working stiff who ever planned to go camping or fishing on his days off. Well, there was always Tolkien. I was sitting in my chair by the window on a Saturday afternoon, moving ever deeper into the mountains of Mordor with Frodo and Sam when Mrs. Shoplaw knocked on the door and asked if I'd like to come down to the parlor and play Scrabble with her and Tina Ackerley. I am not at all crazy about Scrabble, having suffered many humiliations at the hands of my aunts Tansy and Naomi, who each have a huge mental vocabulary of what I still think of as Scrabble shit words like souk, trank, and boot, an Indian ghost, should you wonder. Nevertheless, I said I'd love to play. Mrs. Shoplaw was my landlady, after all, and diplomacy takes many forms. On our way downstairs, she confided, "We're helping Tina bone up. She's quite the Scrabble shark. She's entered in some sort of tournament in Atlantic City next weekend. I believe there's a cash prize." It didn't take long, maybe 4 turns, to discover that our resident librarian could have given my aunts all the game they could handle, and more. By the time Miss Ackerley laid down nobility, with the apologetic smile all Scrabble sharks seem to have, I think they must practice it in front of their mirrors, Emelina Shoplaw was 80 points behind. As for me, well, never mind. "I don't suppose either of you know anything about Annie and Mike Ross, do you?" I asked during a break in the action. Both women seemed to feel a need to study the board a long time before laying down so much as a single tile. "They live on Beach Row in the big Green Victorian?" Miss Ackerley paused with her hands still inside the little brown bag of letters. Her eyes were big, and her thick lenses made them even bigger. "Have you met him?" "Uh-huh. They were trying to fly a kite. Well, she was, and I helped out a little. They were very nice. I just wondered, the two of them all alone in that big house, and him pretty sick." The look they exchanged was pure incredulity, and I started to wish I hadn't raised the subject. "She talks to you?" Mrs. Shoplaw asked. "The Ice Queen actually talks to you?" "Not only talked to me, but gave me a fruit smoothie, thanked me, even apologized to me. But I said none of that. Not because Annie had really iced up when I presumed too much, but because to do so would have seemed disloyal somehow. Well, a little. I got the kite up for him, that's all. I turned the board. It was Tina's, the pro kind with its own built-in little spindle. Come on, Mrs. S. Your turn. Maybe you'll even make a word that's in my puny vocabulary. Given the correct positioning, puny can be worth 70 points, Tina accurately said. Even more if a Y word is connected to pun. Mrs. Shoplaw ignored both the board and the advice. You know who her father is, of course. Can't say I do, although I did know she was on the outs with him in big time. Buddy Ross, as in the Buddy Ross Hour of Power, ring any bells? It did. Vaguely, I thought I might have heard some preacher named Ross on the radio in the costume shop. Kind of made sense. During one of my quick change transformations into Howie, Dottie Lassen had asked me, pretty much out of the clear blue sky, if I had found Jesus. My first impulse had been to tell her I didn't know that he was lost, but I restrained it. One of those Bible shouters, right? Next to Oral Roberts and that Jimmy Swaggart fella, he's just about the biggest of 'em, Mrs. S. said. He broadcasts from this gigantic church, God's Citadel, he calls it, in Atlanta. His radio show goes out all over the country, and now he's getting more and more into TV. I don't know if the stations give him the time free or if he has to buy it. I'm sure he can afford it, especially late at night. That's when the old folks are up with their aches and pains. His shows are half miracle healings and half pleas for more love offerings. Guess he didn't have any luck healing his grandson, I said. Tina withdrew her hand from the letter bag with nothing in it. She had forgotten about Scrabble for the time being, which was a good thing for her hapless victims. Her eyes were sparkling. You don't know any of this story, do you? Ordinarily, I don't believe in gossip, but... She dropped her voice to a confidential tone pitched just above a whisper. But since you've met them, I could tell you. Yes, please, I said. I thought one of my questions, how Annie and Mike came to be living in a huge house on one of North Carolina's ritziest beaches, had already been answered. It was Grandpa Buddy's summer retreat, bought and paid for with love offerings. He's got 2 sons, Tina said. They're both high in his church, deacons or assistant pastors. I don't know what they call them exactly because I don't go for that holy rolling stuff. The daughter, though, she was different. A sporty type. Horseback riding, tennis, archery, deer hunting with her father. Quite a bit of competition shooting. All that got in the papers after her trouble started. Now the Camp Perry shirt made sense. Around the time she turned 18, it all went to hell, quite literally, as he saw it. She went to what they call a secular humanist college, and by all accounts she was quite the wild child. Giving up the shooting competitions and tennis tournaments was one thing. Giving up the church going for parties and liquor and men was quite another. Also, Tina lowered her voice, pot smoking. Gosh, I said, not that. Mrs. Shoplaw gave me a look, but Tina didn't notice. Yes, that. She got in the newspapers, too, those tabloids, because she was pretty and rich, but mostly because of her father. And being fallen away, that's what they call it. She was a scandal to that church of his, wearing miniskirts and going braless and all. Well, you know what those fundamentalists preach is straight out of the Old Testament. All that about the righteous being rewarded and sinners being punished even unto the 7th generation. And she did more than hit the party circuit down there in Greenwich Village. Tina's eyes were so huge they looked on the verge of tumbling from their sockets and rolling down her cheeks. She quit the NRA and joined the American Atheist Society. Ah, and did that get in the papers? Did it ever? Then she got pregnant, no surprise there, and when the baby turned out to have some sort of problem, cerebral palsy, I think, muscular dystrophy, whatever it is, her father was asked about it on one of his crusade things, and do you know what he said? I shook my head, but thought I could make a pretty good guess. He said that God punishes the unbeliever and the sinner. He said his daughter was no different, and maybe her son's affliction would bring her back to God. I don't think it's happened yet, I said. I was thinking of the Jesus kite. I can't understand why people use religion to hurt each other when there's already so much pain in the world, Mrs. Shoplaw said. Religion is supposed to comfort. He's just a self-righteous old prig, Tina said. No matter how many men she might have been with or how many joints of pot she might have smoked, she's still his daughter, and the child is still his grandson. I've seen that boy in town once or twice, either in a wheelchair or tottering along in those cruel braces he has to wear if he wants to walk. He seems like a perfectly nice boy, and she was sober, also wearing a bra. She paused for further recollection. I think. Her father might change, Mrs. Shapaw said, but I doubt it. Young women and young men grow up, but old women and old men just grow older and sure they've got the right on their side, especially if they know Scripture. I remembered something my mother used to say. The devil can quote Scripture. And in a pleasing voice, Mrs. Shapaw agreed moodily. Then she brightened. Still, if the Reverend Ross has let them use his place on Beach Row, maybe he's willing to let bygones be bygones. It might have crossed his mind by now that she was only a young girl, maybe not even old enough to vote. Deb, isn't it your turn? It was. I made tear. It netted me 4 points. My drubbing wasn't merciful, but once Tina Ackerley really got rocking, it was relatively quick. I returned to my room, sat in my chair by the window, and tried to rejoin Frodo and Sam on the road to Mount Doom. I couldn't do it. I closed the book and stared out through the rain-wavery glass at the empty beach and the gray ocean beyond. It was a lonely prospect, and at times like that, my thoughts had a way of turning back to Wendy, wondering where she was, what she was doing, and who she was with. Thinking about her smile, the way her hair fell against her cheek, the soft rise of her breasts, and one of her seemingly endless supply of cardigan sweaters. Not today. Instead of Wendy, I found myself thinking of Annie Ross and realizing I had developed a small but powerful crush on her. The fact that nothing could come of it, she had to be 10 years older than me, maybe 12, only seemed to make things worse. Or maybe I mean better, because unrequited love does have its attractions for young men. Mrs. S. had suggested that Annie's holier-than-thou father might be willing to let bygones be bygones, and I thought she might have something there. I had heard that grandchildren had a way of softening stiff necks, and he might want to get to know the boy while there was still time. He could have found out, from the people he had everywhere, that Mike was smart as well as crippled. It was even possible he had heard rumors that Mike had what Madame Fortuna called the sight. Or maybe all that was too rosy. Maybe Mr. Fire and Brimstone had given her the use of the house in exchange for a promise that she'd keep her mouth shut and not brew up any fresh pot and miniskirt scandals while he was making the crucial transition from radio to television. I could speculate until the cloud-masked sun went down and not be sure of anything on Buddy Ross's account, but I thought I could be sure about one thing on Annie's. She was not ready to let bygones be bygones. I got up and trotted downstairs to the parlor, fishing a scrap of paper with a phone number on it out of my wallet as I went. I could hear Tina and Mrs. S. in the kitchen, chattering away happily. I called Erin Cook's dorm, not expecting to get her on a Saturday afternoon. She was probably down in New Jersey with Tom, watching Rutgers football and singing the Scarlet Knights fight song. But the girl on phone with me said she'd get her, and 3 minutes later, her voice was in my ear. Dev, I was going to call you. In fact, I want to come down and see you if I can get Tom to go along. I think I can, but it wouldn't be next weekend, probably the one after. I checked the calendar hanging on the wall and saw that would be the first weekend in October. Have you actually found something out? I don't know. Maybe. I love to do research, and I really got into this. I've piled up lots of background stuff for sure, but it's not like I solved the murder of Linda Gray in the college library or anything. Still, there are things I want to show you. Things that trouble. Trouble you why? Trouble you how? I don't want to try to explain over the phone. If I can't persuade Tom to come down, I'll put everything in a big manila envelope and send it to you. But I think I can. He wants to see you. He just doesn't want anything to do with my little investigation. Do you want to look at the photos? I thought she was being awfully mysterious, but decided to let it go. Listen, have you heard of an evangelist named Buddy Ross? Buddy? She burst into giggles. The Buddy Ross Hour of Power? My grandma listens to that old faker all the time. He pulls goat stomachs out of people and claims they're tumors. Do you know what Pop Allen would say? Carney from Carney, I said, grinning. Right you are. What do you know about him? And why can't you find out for yourself? Did your mother get scared by a card catalog while she was carrying you? Not that I know of, but by the time I get off work, the Heavens Bay Library is closed. I doubt if they've got the who's who anyway. I mean, it's only one room. It's not about him anyway. It's about his 2 sons. I want to know if they have any kids. Why? Because his daughter has one. He's a great kid, but he's dying. A pause, then, what are you into down there now, Deb? Meeting new people. Come on down, I'd love to see you guys again. Tell Tom we'll stay out of the funhouse. I thought that might make her laugh, but it didn't. Oh, he will. You couldn't get him within 30 yards of the place. We said our goodbyes. I wrote the length of my call on the honor sheet, then went back upstairs and sat by the window. I was feeling that strange, dull jealousy again. Why had Tom Kennedy been the one to see Linda Gray? Why him and not me? The Heavens Bay weekly paper came out on Thursdays, and the headline on the October 4th edition read, Joyland employee saves second life. I thought that was an exaggeration. I'll take full credit for Haley Stansfield, but only part of it for the unpleasant Eddie Parks. The rest, not neglecting a tip of the old Howie hat to Lane Hardy, belongs to Wendy Keegan, because if she hadn't broken up with me in June, I would have been in Durham, New Hampshire that fall, 700 miles from Joyland. I certainly had no idea that more life-saving was on the agenda. Premonitions like that were strictly for folks like Rosie Gold and Mike Ross. I was thinking of nothing but Aaron and Tom's upcoming visit when I arrived at the park on October 1st after another rainy weekend. It was still cloudy, but in honor of Monday, the rain had stopped. Eddie was seated on his apple box throne in front of Horror House and smoking his usual morning cigarette. I raised my hand to him. He didn't bother to raise his in return, just stomped on his butt and leaned over to raise the apple box and toss it under. I'd seen it all 50 times or more and sometimes wondered how many butts were piled up beneath the box, but this time, instead of lifting the apple box, he just went right on leaning. Was there a look of surprise on his face? I can't say. By the time I realized something was wrong, all I could see was his faded and grease-smeared dog top as his head dropped between his knees. He kept going forward, and ended up doing a complete somersault, landing on his back with his legs splayed out and his face up to the cloudy sky. And by then, the only thing on it was a knotted grimace of pain. I dropped my lunch sack, ran to him and fell on my knees beside him. Eddie, what is it? Ticka, he managed. For a moment, I thought he was talking about some obscure disease engendered by tick bites, but then I saw the way he was clutching the left side of his chest with his gloved right hand. The pre-Joyland version of Dev Jones would simply have yelled for help, but after 4 months of talking the talk, help never even crossed my mind. I filled my lungs, lifted my head, and screamed, "Hey, Rube!" into the damp morning air as loud as I could. The only person close enough to hear was Lane Hardy, and he came fast. The summer employees Fred Dean hired didn't have to know CPR when they signed on, but they had to learn. Thanks to the life-saving class I had taken as a teenager, I already knew. The half-dozen of us in that class had learned beside the YMCA pool, working on a dummy with the unlikely name of Herkimer Saltfish. Now I had a chance to put theory into practice for the first time, and you know what? It really wasn't that much different from the clean and jerk I'd used to pop the hot dog out of the little Stansfield girl's throat. I wasn't wearing the fur and there was no hugging involved, but it was still mostly a matter of applying hard force. I cracked 4 of the old bastard's ribs and broke 1. I can't say I'm sorry either. By the time Lane arrived, I was kneeling alongside Eddie and doing closed chest compressions, first rocking forward with my weight on the heels of my hands, and then rocking back and listening to see if he had drawn in a breath. "Christ," Lane said. "Heart attack?" "Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Call an ambulance." The closest phone was in the little shack beside Pop Allen's shooting gallery, his doghouse in the talk. It was locked, but Lane had the keys to the kingdom, 3 masters that opened everything in the park. He ran. I went on doing CPR, rocking back and forth, my thighs aching now, my knees barking about their long contact with the rough pavement of Joyland Avenue. After each 5 compressions, I'd slow count to 3, listening for Eddie to inhale, but there was nothing. No joy in Joyland. Not for Eddie. Not after the first 5. Not after the second 5. Not after a half a dozen 5s. He just lay there with his gloved hands at his sides and his mouth open. Eddie fucking Parks. I stared down at him as Lane came sprinting back, shouting that the ambulance was on its way. I'm not doing it. I thought, I'll be damned if I'll do it. Then I leaned forward, doing another compression on the way, and pressed my mouth to his. It wasn't as bad as I feared. It was worse. His lips were bitter with the taste of cigarettes, and there was the stink of something else in his mouth. God help me, I think it was jalapeno peppers. Maybe from a breakfast omelet. I got a good seal, though, pinched his nostrils shut and breathed down his throat. I did that 5 or 6 times before he started breathing on his own again. I stopped the compressions to see what would happen, and he kept going. Hell must have been full that day. That's all I can figure. I rolled him onto his side in case he vomited. Lane stood beside me with a hand on my shoulder. Shortly after that, we heard the wail of an approaching siren. Lane hurried to meet them at the gate and direct them. Once he was gone, I found myself looking at the snarling green monster faces decorating the facade of Horror House. "Come in if you dare," was written above the faces in drippy green letters. I found myself thinking again of Linda Gray, who had gone in alive and had been carried out hours later, cold and dead. I think my mind went to that because Erin was coming with information that troubled her. I also thought of the girl's killer. "Could have been you," Mrs. Shoplaw had said. "Except you're dark-haired instead of blonde and don't have a bird's head tattooed on one of your hands. This guy did. An eagle or maybe a hawk." Eddie's hair was a premature gray of the lifelong heavy smoker, but it could have been blonde 4 years ago. And he always wore gloves. Surely he was too old to have been the man who had accompanied Linda Gray on her last dark ride. Surely, but... The ambulance was very close, but not quite here, although I could see Lane at the gate waving his hands over his head, making hurry-up gestures. Thinking what the hell, I stripped off Eddie's gloves. His fingers were lacy with dead skin, the backs of his hands red beneath a thick layer of some sort of white cream. There were no tattoos, just psoriasis. As soon as he was loaded up and the ambulance was heading back to the tiny Heavens Bay Hospital, I went into the nearest Donecker and rinsed my mouth again and again. It was a long time before I could get rid of the taste of those damn jalapeno peppers, and I've never touched one since. When I came out, Lane Hardy was standing by the door. "That was something," he said. "You brought him back." "He won't be out of the woods for a while, and there might be brain damage." "Maybe yes, maybe no, but if you hadn't been there, he'd have been in the woods permanently. First the little girl, now the dirty old man. I might start calling you Jesus instead of Jonesy, because you sure are the savior. You do that and I'm DS. That was the talk for down south, which in turn meant turning in your time card for good. Okay, but you did all right, Jonesy. In fact, I gotta say you rocked the house." "The taste of him," I said. "God." "Yeah, I bet, but look on the bright side. With him gone, you're free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty you're free at last. I think you like it better that way, don't you?" I certainly did. From his back pocket, Lane drew out a pair of rawhide gloves. Eddie's gloves. "Found these lying on the ground. Why'd you take them off of him?" I wanted to let his hands breathe." That sounded primo stupid, but the truth would have sounded even stupider. I couldn't believe I'd entertained the notion of Eddie Parks being Linda Gray's killer for even a moment. "When I took my life-saving course, they told us that heart attack victims need all the free skin they can get. It helps somehow." I shrugged. "It's supposed to, at least." "Huh. You learn a new thing every day." He flapped the gloves. "I don't think Eddie's going to be back for a long time, if at all, so you might as well stick these in his doghouse, yeah?" "Okay," I said, and that's what I did. But later that day I went and got them again. Something else, too. I didn't like him. We're straight on that, right? He'd given me no reason to like him. He had, so far as I knew, given not one single Joyland employee a reason to like him. Even old-timers like Rosie Gold and Pop Allen gave him a wide berth. Nevertheless, I found myself entering the Heavens Bay Community Hospital that afternoon at 4 o'clock and asking if Edward Parks could have a visitor. I had his gloves in one hand, along with the something else. The blue-haired volunteer receptionist went through her paperwork twice, shaking her head, and I was starting to think Eddie had died after all when she said, It's Edwin, not Edward. He's in room 315, that's ICU, so you have to check at the nurse's station first." I thanked her and went to the elevator, one of those huge ones big enough to admit a gurney. It was slower than old cold death, which gave me plenty of time to wonder what I was doing here. If Eddie needed a visit from a park employee, it should have been Fred Dean, not me, because Fred was the guy in charge that fall. Yet, here I was. They probably wouldn't let me see him anyway. But after checking his chart, the head nurse gave me the okay. "He may be sleeping, though." "Any idea about his..." I tapped my head. "Mental function? Well, he was able to give us his name." That sounded hopeful. He was indeed asleep. With his eyes shut and that day's late-arriving sun shining on his face, the idea that he might have been Linda Gray's date a mere 4 years ago was even more ludicrous. He looked at least 100, maybe 120. I saw I needn't have brought his gloves either. Someone had bandaged his hands, probably after treating the psoriasis with something a little more powerful than whatever OTC cream he had been using on them. Looking at those bulky white mittens made me feel a queer, reluctant pity. I crossed the room as quietly as I could and put the gloves in the closet with the clothes he had been wearing when he was brought in. That left me with the other thing, a photograph that had been pinned to the wall of his cluttered, tobacco-smelling little shack, next to a yellowing calendar that was 2 years out of date. The photo showed Eddie and a plain-faced woman standing in the weedy front yard of an anonymous tract house. Eddie looked about 25. He had his arm around the woman. She was smiling at him. And wonder of wonders, he was smiling back. There was a rolling table beside his bed with a plastic pitcher and a glass on it. This I thought rather stupid. With his hands bandaged the way they were, he wasn't going to be pouring anything for a while. Still, the pitcher could serve one useful purpose. I propped the photo against it so he'd see it when he woke up. With that done, I started for the door. I was almost there when he spoke in a whispery voice. It was a long way from his usual ill-tempered rasp. "Kiddo?" I returned, not eagerly, to his bedside. There was a chair in the corner, but I had no intention of pulling it over and sitting down. "How you feeling, Eddie?" "Can't really say. Hard to breathe. They got me all taped up." "I brought you your gloves, but I see they already—" I nodded at his bandaged hands. "Yeah." He sucked in air. "If anything good comes out of this, maybe they fix them up. Fucking itch all the time, they do." He looked at the picture. "Why'd you bring that? And what were you doing in my doghouse?" "Lane told me to put your gloves in there. I did, but then I thought you might want them, and you might want the picture. Maybe she's someone you'd want Fred Dean to call." "Kareem?" He snorted. "She's been dead for 20 years. Pour me some water, kiddo. I'm as dry as 10-year dog shit." I poured and held the glass for him, and even wiped the corner of his mouth with the sheet when he dribbled. It was all a lot more intimate than I wanted, but it didn't seem so bad when I remembered that I'd been soul-kissing the miserable bastard only hours before. He didn't thank me, but when had he ever? What he said was, "Hold that picture up." I did as he asked. He looked at it fixedly for several seconds and sighed. "Miserable, scalding, backbiting cunt. Walking out on her for Royal American shows was the smartest thing I ever did." A tear trembled at the corner of his left eye, hesitated, then rolled down his cheek. "Want me to take it back and pin it up in your doghouse, Eddie?" "No, might as well leave it. We had a kid, you know. A little gal." "Yeah?" "Yeah. She got hit by a car. 3 years old she was and died like a dog in the street. That miserable cunt was yakking on the phone instead of watching her." He turned his head aside and closed his eyes. "Go on. Get out of here. Hurts to talk. And I'm tired. Got an elephant sitting on my chest." "Okay. Take care of yourself." He grimaced without opening his eyes. "That's a laugh. How exactly am I supposed to do that? You got any ideas? Because I haven't. I got no relatives, no friends, no savings, no insurance. What am I gonna do now?" "It'll work out," I said lamely. "Sure. In the movies it always does. Go on. Get lost." This time I was all the way out the door before he spoke again. "You should let me die, kiddo." He said it without melodrama, just a passing observation. "I could have been with my little gal." When I walked back into the hospital lobby, I stopped dead, at first not sure I was seeing who I thought I was seeing. But it was her, all right, with one of her endless series of arduous novels open in front of her. This one called The Dissertation. "Annie?" She looked up, at first weary, then smiling as she recognized me. "Dev, what are you doing here?" "Visiting a guy from the park. He had a heart attack today." "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Is he going to be all right?" She didn't invite me to sit down next to her, but I did anyway. My visit to Eddie had upset me in ways I didn't understand, and my nerves were jangling. It wasn't unhappiness, and it wasn't sorrow. It was a queer, unfocused anger that had something to do with the foul taste of jalapeno peppers that still seemed to linger in my mouth, and with Wendy. God knew why. It was wearying to know that I wasn't over her, even yet. A broken arm would have healed quicker. I don't know. I didn't talk to a doctor. Is Mike all right? Yes, it's just a regularly scheduled appointment. A chest x-ray and a complete blood count. Because of the pneumonia, you know. Thank God he's over it now. Except for that lingering cough, Mike's fine. She was still holding her book open, which probably meant she wanted me to go, and that made me angrier. You have to remember that was the year that everyone wanted me to go. Even the guy whose life I'd saved. Which is probably why I said, Mike doesn't think he's fine, so who am I supposed to believe here, Annie? Her eyes widened with surprise, then grew distant. I'm sure I don't care who or what you believe, Devin. It's really not any of your business. Yes, it is. That came from behind us. Mike had rolled up in his chair. It wasn't the motorized kind, which meant he had been turning the wheels with his hands. Strong boy, cough or no cough. He had buttoned his shirt wrong, though. Annie turned to him, surprised. What are you doing here? You were supposed to let the nurse... I told her I could do it on my own, and she said okay. It's just a left and 2 rights from radiology, you know. I'm not blind, just dying. Mr. Jones was visiting a friend of his, Mike. So now I had been demoted back to Mr. Jones. She closed her book with a snap and stood up. He's probably anxious to get home, and I'm sure you must be I want him to take us to the park. Mike spoke calmly enough, but his voice was loud enough to make people look around. Us. Mike, you know that's not to Joyland. To Joyland. Still calm, but louder still. Now everyone was looking. Annie's cheeks were flaming. I want you both to take me. His voice rose louder still. I want you to take me to Joyland before I die. Her hand covered her mouth. Her eyes were huge. Her words, when they came, were muffled but understandable. Mike, you're not going to die. Who told you? She turned on me. Do I have you to thank for putting that idea in his head? Of course not. I was very conscious that our audience was growing. It now included a couple of nurses and a doctor in blue scrubs and booties, but I didn't care. I was still angry. He told me. Why would that surprise you when you know all about his intuitions? That was my afternoon for provoking tears. First Eddie, now Annie. Mike was dry-eyed, though, and he looked every bit as furious as I felt. But he said nothing as she grabbed the handles of his wheelchair, spun it around, and drove it at the door. I thought she was going to crash into them, but the magic eye got them open just in time. Let them go, I thought. But I was tired of letting women go. I was tired of just letting things happen to me and then feeling bad about them. A nurse approached me. Is everything all right? No, I said, and followed them out. Annie had parked in the lot adjacent to the hospital where a sign announced, "These 2 rows reserved for the handicapped." She had a van, I saw, with plenty of room for the folded-up wheelchair in the back. She had gotten the passenger door open, but Mike was refusing to get out of the chair. He was gripping the handles with all his strength, his hands dead white. Get in, she shouted at him. Mike shook his head, not looking at her. Get in, damn it! This time he didn't even bother to shake his head. She grabbed him and yanked. The wheelchair had its brake on and tipped forward. I grabbed it just in time to keep it from going over and spilling them both into the open door of the van. Annie's hair had fallen into her face, and the eyes peering through it were wild, the eyes almost of a skittish horse in a thunderstorm. Let go! This is all your fault. I never should have... Stop, I said. I took hold of her shoulders. The hollows there were deep, the bones close to the surface, I thought. She'd been too busy stuffing calories into him to worry about herself. Let me go! I don't want to take him away from you, I said. Annie, that's the last thing I want. She stopped struggling. Warily, I let go of her. The novel she had been reading had fallen to the pavement in the struggle. I bent down, picked it up, and put it into the pocket of the back of the wheelchair. Mom? Mike took her hand. It doesn't have to be the last good time. Then I understood. Even before her shoulders slumped and the sobs started, I understood. It wasn't the fear that I'd stick him on some crazy fast ride and that the burst of adrenaline would kill him. It wasn't the fear that a stranger would steal the damaged heart she loved so well. It was a kind of atavistic belief, a mother's belief, that if they never started doing certain last things, life would go on as it had. Morning smoothies at the end of the boardwalk, evenings with the kite at the end of the boardwalk, all of it in a kind of endless summer. Only it was October now and the beach was deserted. The happy screams of teenagers on the Thunderball and the little kids shooting down the splash and crash water slide had ceased. There was a nip in the air as the days drew down. No summer is endless. She put her hands over her face and sat down on the passenger seat of the van. It was too high for her, and she almost slid off. I caught her and steadied her. I don't think she noticed. "Go on, take him," she said. "I don't give a fuck. Take him parachute jumping if you want. Just don't expect me to be a part of your boy's adventure." Mike said, "I can't go without you." That got her to drop her hands and look at him. "Michael, you're all I've got. Do you understand that?" "Yes," he said. He took one of her hands in both of his. "And you're all I've got." I could see by her face that the idea had never crossed her mind. Not really. "Help me get in," Mike said. "Both of you, please." When he was settled, I don't remember fastening his seatbelt, so maybe this was before they were a big deal. I closed the door and walked around the nose of the van with her. "His chair," she said distractedly. "I've got to get his chair." "I'll put it in. You sit behind the wheel and get yourself ready to drive. Take a few deep breaths." She let me help her in. I had her above the elbow, and I could close my whole hand around her upper arm. I thought of telling her she couldn't live on arduous novels alone, and thought better of it. She had been told enough this afternoon. I folded the wheelchair and stowed it in the cargo compartment, taking longer with the job than I needed to, giving her time to compose herself. When I went back to the driver's side, I half expected to find the window rolled up, but it was still down. She had wiped her eyes and nose and pushed her hair into some semblance of order. I said, "He can't go without you, and neither can I." She spoke to me as if Mike weren't there and listening. "I'm so afraid for him all the time. He sees so much, and so much of it hurts him. That's what the nightmares are about. I know it. He's such a great kid. Why can't he just get well? Why this? Why this?" "I don't know," I said. She turned to kiss Mike's cheek. Then she turned back to me, drew in a deep, shaky breath, and let it out. "So when do we go?" she asked. The Return of the King was surely not as arduous as a dissertation, but that night I couldn't have read The Cat in the Hat. After eating some canned spaghetti for supper, and largely ignoring Mrs. Shoplaw's pointed observations about how some young people seem determined to mistreat their bodies, I went up to my room and sat by the window, staring out at the dark and listening to the steady beat and retreat of the surf. I was on the verge of dozing when Mrs. S. knocked lightly on my door and said, "You got a call, Dev. It's a little boy." I went down to the parlor in a hurry because I could think of only one little boy who might call me. "Mike?" He spoke in a low voice. "My mom is sleeping. She said she was tired." "I bet she was," I said, thinking of how we ganged up on her. "I know we did," Mike said as if I had spoken the thought aloud. "We had to." "Mike, can you read minds? Are you reading mine?" "I don't really know," he said. "Sometimes I see things and hear things, that's all. And sometimes I get ideas. It was my idea to come to Grandpa's house. Mom said he'd never let us, but I knew he would. Whatever I have, the special thing, I think it came from him. He heals people, you know. I mean, sometimes he fakes it, but sometimes he really does." "Why did you call, Mike?" He grew animated. "About Joyland. Can we really ride the merry-go-round in the Ferris wheel?" "I'm pretty sure." "Shoot in the shooting gallery?" "Maybe, if your mother says so. All this stuff is contingent on your mother's approval. That means..." "I know what it means," sounding impatient. Then the child's excitement broke through again. "It's so awesome!" "None of the fast rides," I said. "Are we straight on that?" For one thing, they're buttoned up for the winter. The Carolina spin was too, but with Lane Hardy's help, it wouldn't take 40 minutes to get it running again. For another... "Yeah, I know, my heart. The Ferris wheel will be enough for me. We can see it from the end of the boardwalk, you know. From the top, it must be like seeing the world from my kite." I smiled. "It is like that, sort of. But remember, only if your mom says you can. She's the boss." "We're going for her. She'll know when we get there." He sounded eerily sure of himself. "And it's for you, Dev. But mostly it's for the girl. She's been there too long. She wants to leave." My mouth dropped open. But there was no danger of drooling. My mouth had gone entirely dry. "How?" Just a croak. I swallowed again. "How do you know about her?" "I don't know, but I think she's why I came. Did I tell you it's not white?" "You did, but you said you didn't know what that meant. Do you now?" "Nope." He began to cough. I waited it out. When it cleared, he said, "I have to go. My mom's getting up from her nap. Now she'll be up half the night reading." "Yeah?" "Yeah. I really hope she lets me go on the Ferris wheel." "It's called the Carolina Spin, but people who work there just call it the Hoister. Some of them, Eddie, for instance, actually called it the Chump Hoister, but I didn't tell him that. Joyland folks have this kind of secret talk. That's part of it. The Hoister. I'll remember. Bye, Dev." The phone clicked in my ear. This time, it was Fred Dean who had the heart attack. He lay on the ramp to the Carolina Spin, his face blue and contorted. I knelt beside him and started chest compressions. When there was no result from that, I leaned forward, pinched his nostrils shut, and jammed my lips over his. Something tickled across my teeth and onto my tongue. I pulled back and saw a black tide of baby spiders pouring from his mouth. I woke up half out of bed, the covers pulled loose and wound around me in a kind of shroud, heart pumping, clawing at my own mouth. It took several seconds for me to realize that there was nothing in there. Nonetheless, I got up, went to the bathroom, and drank 2 glasses of water. I may have had worse dreams than the one that woke me at 3 o'clock on that Tuesday morning, but if so, I can't remember them. I remade my bed and laid back down, convinced there would be no more sleep for me that night. Yet I had almost dozed off again when it occurred to me that the big emotional scene the 3 of us had played out at the hospital yesterday might have been for nothing. Sure, Joyland was happy to make special arrangements for the lame, the halt, and the blind, what are now called special needs children, during the season, but the season was over. Would the park's undoubtedly expensive insurance policy still provide coverage if something happened to Mike Ross in October? I could see Fred Dean shaking his head when I made my request and saying he was very sorry, but... It was chilly that morning, with a strong breeze, so I took my car, parking beside Lane's pickup. I was early, and ours were the only vehicles in Lot A, which was big enough to hold 500 cars. Fallen leaves tumbled across the pavement, making an insectal sound that reminded me of the spiders in my dream. Lane was sitting in a lawn chair outside Madame Fortuna's Shy, which would soon be disassembled and stored for the winter, eating a bagel generously smeared with cream cheese. His derby was tilted at its usual insouciant angle, and there was a cigarette parked behind one ear. The only new thing was the denim jacket he was wearing. Another sign, had I needed one, that our Indian summer was over. "Jonesy, Jonesy, looking lonely. Want a bagel? I got an extra." "Sure," I said. "Can I talk to you about something while I eat it?" "Come to confess your sins, have you? Take a seat, my son." He pointed to the side of the fortune-telling booth, where another couple of folded lawn chairs were leaning. "Nothing sinful," I said, opening one of the chairs. I sat down and took the brown bag he was offering. But I made a promise, and now I'm afraid I might not be able to keep it. I told him about Mike and how I had convinced his mother to let him come to the park. No easy task, given her fragile emotional state. I finished with how I had woken up in the middle of the night, convinced Fred Dean would never allow it. The only thing I didn't mention was the dream that had awakened me. "So," Lane said when I'd finished, "is she a fox, the mommy?" "Well, yeah, actually she is, but that isn't the reason." He patted my shoulder and gave me a patronizing smile I could have done without. "Say no more, Jonesy, say no more." "Lane, she's 10 years older than I am." "Okay, and if I had $1 for every babe I ever took out who was 10 years younger, I could buy me a steak dinner at Hanratty's in the Bay. Age is just a number, my son." "Terrific. Thanks for your wisdom. Now tell me if I stepped in shit when I told the kid he could come to the park and ride the spin in the merry-go-round." "You stepped in shit," he said, and my heart sank. Then he raised a finger. But... "But? Have you set a date for this little field trip yet?" "Not exactly. I was thinking maybe Thursday. Before Aaron and Tom showed up, in other words." "Thursday's no good. Friday either. Will the kid and his foxy mommy still be here next week?" "I guess so, but..." "Then plan on Monday or Tuesday." "Why wait?" "For the paper." Looking at me as if I were the world's biggest idiot. "Paper?" "The local rag. It comes out on Thursday. When your latest life-saving feat hits the front page, you're going to be Freddie Dean's fair-haired boy." Lane tossed the remains of his bagel into the nearest litter barrel, 2 points, and then raised his hands in the air as if he was framing a newspaper headline. "Come to Joyland. We not only sell fun, we save lives." He smiled and tilted his derby the other way. "Priceless publicity. Fred's gonna owe you one. Take it to the bank and say thanks." "How would the paper even find out? I can't see Eddie Parks telling them." Although if he did, he'd probably want them to make sure the part about how I practically crushed his ribcage made paragraph 1. He rolled his eyes. I keep forgetting what a Jonesy-come-lately you are to this part of the world. The only articles anybody actually reads in that catbox liner are the police beat and the ambulance calls. But ambulance calls are pretty dry. As a special favor to you, Jonesy, I'll toddle on down to the Banner office on my lunch break and tell the rubes all about your heroism. They'll send someone out to interview you pronto. I don't really want... Oh, gosh. A Boy Scout with a merit badge and modesty. Save it. You want the kid to get a tour of the park, right? Yes. Then do the interview. Also, smile pretty for the camera. Which, if I may jump ahead, is pretty much what I did. As I was folding up my chair, he said, Our Freddie Dean might have said fuck the insurance and risked it anyways, you know. He doesn't look it, but he's Carney from Carney himself. His father was a low-pitched jackjaw on the corn circuit. Freddie told me once his pop carried a Michigan bankroll big enough to choke a horse. I knew low-pitched jackjaw and corn circuit, but not Michigan bankroll. Lane laughed when I asked him. 220s on the outside, the rest either singles or cut-up green paper. Great gag when you want to attract a tip, but when it comes to Freddie himself, that ain't the point. He reset his derby yet again. What is? Carnies have a weakness for good-looking points and tight skirts and kids down on their luck. They also have a strong allergy to rube rules, which includes all the bean counter bullshit. So maybe I wouldn't have to... He raised his hands to stop me. Better not to have to find out. Do the interview. The Banner's photographer posed me in front of the Thunderball. The picture made me wince when I saw it. I was squinting and thought I looked like the village idiot, but it did the job. The paper was on Fred's desk when I came in to see him on Friday morning. He hemmed and hawed, then okayed my request, as long as Lane promised to stick with us while the kid and his mother were in the park. Lane said okay to that with no hemming and hawing. He said he wanted to see my girlfriend and burst out laughing when I started to fulminate. Later that morning, I told Annie Ross I'd set up a tour of the park that following Tuesday morning if the weather was good, Wednesday or Thursday if it wasn't. Then I held my breath. There was a long pause, followed by a sigh. Then she said okay. That was a busy Friday. I left the park early, drove to Wilmington, and was waiting when Tom and Erin stepped off the train. Erin ran the length of the platform, threw herself into my arms, and kissed me on both cheeks and the tip of my nose. She made a lovely armful, but it's impossible to mistake sisterly kisses for anything other than what they are. I let her go and allowed Tom to pull me into his enthusiastic, back-thumping man hug. It was as if we hadn't seen each other in 5 years instead of 5 weeks. I was a working stiff now, and although I had put on my best chinos and sports shirt, I looked it. Even with my grease-spotted jeans and sun-faded dog top back in the closet of my room at Mrs. S's, I looked it. It's so great to see you, Erin said. My God, what a tan. I shrugged. What can I say? I'm working in the northernmost province of the Redneck Riviera. You made the right call, Tom said. I never would have believed it when you said you weren't going back to school. But you made the right call. Maybe I should have stayed at Joyland. He smiled that I French-kissed the Blarney Stone smile of his that could charm the birdies down from the trees, but it didn't quite dispel the shadow that crossed his face. He could never have stayed at Joyland, not after our dark ride. They stayed the weekend at Mrs. Chapel's beachside accommodations. Mrs. S was delighted to have them, and Tina Ackerley was delighted to see them. And all 5 of us had a hilarious, half-drunk picnic supper on the beach with a roaring bonfire to provide warmth. But on Saturday afternoon, when it came time for Erin to share her troubling information with me, Tom declared his intention to whip Tina and Mrs. S at Scrabble and send us off alone. I thought that if Annie and Mike were at the end of their boardwalk, I'd introduce Erin to them. But the day was chilly, the wind off the ocean was downright cold, and the picnic table at the end of the boardwalk was deserted. Even the umbrella was gone, taken in and stored for the winter. At Joyland, all 4 parking lots were empty, save for the little fleet of service trucks. Erin, dressed in a heavy turtleneck sweater and wool pants, carrying a slim and very businesslike briefcase with her initials embossed on it, raised her eyebrows when I produced my key ring and used the biggest key to open the gate. So, she said, you're one of them now. That embarrassed me. Aren't we all embarrassed, even if we don't know why, when someone says we're one of them? Not really. I carry a gate key in case I get here before anyone else, or if I'm last to leave, but only Fred and Lane have all the keys of the kingdom. She laughed as if I had said something silly. The key to the gate is the key to the kingdom. That's what I think. Then she sobered and gave me a long, measuring stare. You look older, Deb. I thought so even before we got off the train when I saw you waiting on the platform. Now I know why. You went to work and we went back to Never Never Land to play with the lost boys and girls. The ones who will eventually turn up in suits from Brooks Brothers and with MBAs in their pockets. I pointed to the briefcase. I would go with a suit from Brooks Brothers, if they really make suits for women, that is. She sighed. It was a gift from my parents. My father wants me to be a lawyer like him. So far I haven't gotten up the nerve to tell him I want to be a freelance photographer. He'll blow his stack. We walked up Joyland Avenue in silence except for the bone-like rattle of the fallen leaves. She looked at the covered ride, the dry fountain, the frozen horses on the merry-go-round, the empty story stage and the deserted wiggle-waggle village. Kind of sad seeing it this way. It makes me think mortal thoughts. She looked at me appraisingly. We saw the paper. Mrs. Shaplaw made sure to leave it in our room. You did it again. Eddie? I just happened to be there. We had reached Madame Fortuna's shy. The lawn chairs were still leaning against it. I unfolded too and gestured for Erin to sit down. I sat beside her, then pulled out a pint bottle of Old Log Cabin from the pocket of my jacket. Cheap whiskey, but it takes the chill off. Looking amused, she took a small nip. I took one of my own, screwed on the cap, and stowed the bottle in my pocket. 50 yards down Joyland Avenue, our midway, I could see the tall false front of Horror House, and read the drippy green letters, "Come in if you dare." Her small hand gripped my shoulder with surprising strength. You saved the old bastard. You did. Give yourself some credit, you. I smiled, thinking of Lane saying that I had a merit badge of modesty. Maybe giving myself credit for stuff wasn't one of my strong points in those days. Will he live? Probably. Freddie Dean talked to some of the doctors who said, blah, 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 patient must give up smoking, blah, 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 patient must give up eating french fries, blah, 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 patient must begin a regular exercise regimen. I can just see Eddie Parks jogging, Erin said. Uh-huh, with a cigarette in his mouth and a bag of pork rinds in his hand. She giggled. The wind gusted and blew her hair around her face. In her heavy sweater and businesslike dark gray pants, she didn't look much like the flushed American beauty who'd run around Joyland in a little green dress, smiling her pretty Erin smile and coaxing people to let her take their picture with her old-fashioned camera. What have you got for me? What did you find out? She opened her briefcase and took out a folder. Are you absolutely sure you want to get into this? Because I don't think you're going to listen and say, elementary, my dear Erin, and spit out the killer's name like Sherlock Holmes. If I needed evidence that Sherlock Holmes I wasn't, my wild idea that Eddie Parks might have been the so-called funhouse killer was it. I thought of telling her that I was more interested in putting the victim to rest than I was in catching the killer, but it would have sounded crazy, even factoring in Tom's experience. I'm not expecting that either. And by the way, you owe me almost $40 for interlibrary loan fees. I'm good for it. She poked me in the ribs. You better be. I'm not working my way through school for the fun of it. She settled her briefcase between her ankles and opened the folder. I saw Xeroxes, 2 or 3 pages of typewritten notes, and some glossy photographs that looked like the kind the Coneys got when they bought the Hollywood Girls pitch. Okay, here we go. I started with the Charleston Post-Courier article you told me about. She handed me one of the Xeroxes. It's a Sunday piece, 5,000 words of speculation and maybe 800 words of actual info. Read it later if you want. I'll summarize the salient points. 4 girls, 5 if you count her. She pointed down the midway at Horror House. The first was Delight Mowbray, Dee Dee to her friends, from Waycross, Georgia. White, 21 years old. 2 or 3 days before she was killed, she told her good friend Jasmine Withers that she had a new boyfriend, older and very handsome. She was found beside a trail on the edge of the Okefenokee Swamp on August 31st, 1961, 9 days after she disappeared. If the guy had taken her into the swamp even a little way, she might not have been found for a much longer time. If ever, I said. A body left in there would have been gator bait in 20 minutes. Gross, but true. She handed me another Xerox. This is a story from the Waycross Journal-Herald. There was a photo. It showed a somber cop holding up a plaster cast of tire tracks. The theory is he dumped her where he cut her throat. The tire tracks were made by a truck, the story says. Dumped her like garbage, I said. Also gross, but true. She handed me another Xerox newspaper clipping. Here's number 2. Claudine Sharp from Rocky Mount, right here in North Carolina. White, 23 years old, found dead in a local theater, August 2nd, 1963. The movie being shown was Lawrence of Arabia, which happens to be very long and very loud. The guy who wrote the story quotes an unnamed police source as saying the guy probably cut her throat during one of the battle scenes. Pure speculation, of course. He left a bloody shirt and gloves, then must have walked out in the shirt he was wearing underneath. That just about has to be the guy who killed Linda Gray, I said. Don't you think so? It sure sounds like it. The cops questioned all her friends, but Claudine hadn't said anything about a new boyfriend. Or who she was going to the movies with that night? Not even to her parents? Aaron gave me a patient look. She was 23, Dev, not 14. She lived all the way across town from her parents, worked in a drugstore and had a little apartment above it. You got all that from the newspaper story? Of course not. I also made some calls. Practically dialed my fingers off, if you want to know the truth. You owe me for the long distance, too. More about Claudine Sharp later. For now, let's move on. Victim number 3, according to the Post-Courier story, was a girl from Santee, South Carolina. Now we're up to 1965. Eva Longbottom, age 19, black, disappeared on July 4th. Her body was found 9 days later by a couple of fishermen lying on the north bank of the Santee River, raped and stabbed in the heart. The others were neither black nor raped. You can put her in the Funhouse Killer column if you want to, but I'm doubtful myself. The last victim before Linda Gray was her. She handed me what had to be a high school yearbook photo of a beautiful golden-haired girl, the kind who's the head cheerleader, the homecoming queen, dates the football quarterback, and is still liked by everyone. Darlene Stamnacker. Probably would have changed her last name if she had gotten into the movie biz, which was her stated goal. White, 19, from Maxton, North Carolina. Disappeared on June 29, 1967. Found 2 days later after a massive search inside a roadside lean-to in the Sugar Pine Willy Wag south of Elrod. Throat cut. Christ, she's beautiful. Didn't she have a steady boyfriend? A girl this good-looking, why do you even ask? And that's where the police went first, only he wasn't around. He and 3 of his buddies had gone camping in the Blue Ridge, and they could all vouch for him. Unless he flapped his arms and flew back, it wasn't him. Then came Linda Gray, I said. Number 5 if they were all murdered by the same guy, that is. Aaron raised a teacherly finger. And only 5 if all the guy's victims have been found. There could have been others in 62, 64, 66, you get it. The wind gusted and moaned through the struts of the spin. Now for the things that trouble me, Aaron said, as if 5 dead girls weren't troubling enough. From her folder, she took another Xerox. It was a flyer, a shout in the talk, advertising something called Manly Wellman's Show of 1,000 Wonders. It showed a couple of clowns holding up a parchment listing some of the wonders, one of which was America's finest collection of freaks and oddities. There were also rides, games, fun for the kiddies, and the world's scariest funhouse. Come in if you dare, I thought. You got this from the interlibrary loan? I asked. Yes, I've decided you can get anything by way of interlibrary loan if you're willing to dig. Or maybe I should say cock and ear, because it's really the world's biggest jungle telegraph. This ad appeared in the Waycross Journal-Herald. It ran during the first week of August 1961. The Wellman Carney was in Waycross when the first girl disappeared? Her name was Dee Dee Mowbray, and no, it had moved on by then, but it was there when Dee Dee told her girlfriend that she had a new boyfriend. Now look at this. It's from the Rocky Mount Telegram. Ran for a week in mid-July of 1963. Standard advance advertising. I probably don't even need to tell you that. It was another full-pager shouting Manly Wellman's Show of 1,000 Wonders. Same 2 clowns holding up the same parchment. But 2 years after the stop in Waycross, they were also promising a $10,000 cover-all Beano game, and the word freaks was nowhere to be seen. Was the show in town when the Sharp girl was killed in the movie theater? Left the day before. She tapped the bottom of the sheet. All you have to do is look at the dates, Dev. I wasn't as familiar with the timeline as she was, but I didn't bother defending myself. The third girl, Longbottom? I didn't find anything about a Carney in the Santee area, and I sure wouldn't have found anything about the Wellman Show, because it went bust in the fall of 1964. I found that in Outdoor Trade and Industry. So far as I, or any of my many librarian helpers could discover, it's the only trade magazine that covers the Carney and amusement park biz. Jesus, Aaron, you should forget photography and find yourself a rich writer or movie producer. Hire on as his research assistant. I'd rather take pictures. Research is too much like work, but don't lose the thread here, Devin. There was no Carney in the Santee area, true, but the Eva Longbottom murder doesn't look like the other 4 anyway. Not to me. No rape in the others, remember? That you know of. Newspapers are coy about that stuff. That's right, they say molested or sexually assaulted instead of raped, but they get the point across, believe me. What about Darlene Shoemaker? Was there Stamnacker? These girls were murdered, Dev. The least you can do is get their names right. I will. Give me time. She put a hand over mine. Sorry, I'm throwing this at you all at once, aren't I? I've had weeks to brood over it. Have you been? Sort of. It's pretty awful. She was right. If you read a whodunit or see a mystery movie, you can whistle gaily past whole heaps of corpses, only interested in finding out if it was the butler or the evil stepmother. But these had been real young women. Crows had probably ripped their flesh. Maggots would have infested their eyes and squirmed up their noses and into the gray meat of their brains. Was there a carny in the Maxton area when the Stamnacker girl was killed? No, but there was a county fair about to start in Lumberton. That's the nearest town of any size. Here. She handed me another Xerox, this one advertising the Robeson County Summer Fair. Once again, Erin tapped the sheet. This time she was calling my attention to a line reading, 50 safe rides provided by Southern Star Amusements. I also looked Southern Star up in outdoor trade and industry. The company's been around since after World War II. They're based in Birmingham and travel all over the South putting up rides. Nothing so grand as the Thunderball or the Delirium Shaker, but they've got plenty of chump shoots and the jocks to run them. I had to grin at that. She hadn't forgotten all the talk, it seemed. Chump shoots were rides that could be easily put up or taken down. If you've ever ridden the Crazy Cups or the Wild Mouse, you've been on a chump shoot. I called the ride boss at Southern Star, said I'd worked at Joyland this summer and was doing a term paper on the amusement industry for my sociology class. Which I just might do, you know. After all this, it'd be a slam dunk. He told me what I had already guessed, that there was a big turnover in their line of work. He couldn't tell me offhand if they had picked anyone up from the Wellman show, but he said it was likely. A couple of roughies here, a couple of jocks there, maybe a ride monkey or two. So the guy who killed Dee Dee and Claudine could have been at that fair, and Darlene Stamnacker could have met him. The fair wasn't officially open for business yet, but lots of townies gravitate to the local fairgrounds to watch the ride monkeys and the local gazoonies do the setup. She looked at me levelly, and I think that's just what happened. Erin, is the Carney link in the story the Post-Courier published after Linda Gray was killed? Or maybe I should call it the amusement link. Nope. Can I have another nip from your bottle? I'm cold. We can go inside. No, it's this murder stuff that makes me cold. Every time I go over it. I gave her the bottle, and after she'd taken her nip, I took one of my own. Maybe you're Sherlock Holmes, I said. What about the cops? You think they missed it? I don't know for sure, but I think they did. If this was a detective show on TV, there'd be one smart old cop, a Lieutenant Columbo type, who'd look at the big picture and put it together. But I guess there aren't many guys like that in real life. Besides, the big picture's hard to see because it's scattered across 3 states in 8 years. One thing you can be sure of is that if he ever worked at Joyland, he's long gone. I'm sure the turnover in an amusement park isn't as fast as it is in a road company like Southern Star Amusements, but there are still plenty of people leaving and coming in. I knew that for myself. Ride jocks and concession shouters aren't exactly the most grounded people, and gazoonies went in and out like the tide. Now here's the other thing that troubles me, she said, and handed me one little pile of 8x10 photos. Printed on the white border at the bottom of each was photo taken by your Joyland Hollywood girl. I shuffled through them and felt in need of another nip when I realized what they were. The photos showing Linda Gray and the man who had killed her. Jesus God, Erin. These aren't newspaper pics. Where did you get them? Brenda Rafferty. I had to butter her up a little, tell her what a good mom she's been to all of us Hollywood girls, but in the end, she came through. These are fresh prints made from negatives she had in her personal files and loaned to me. Here's something interesting, Dev. You see the headband that Gray Girl's wearing? Yes. An Alice band, Mrs. Shopwell had called it, a blue Alice band. Brenda said they fuzzed that out in the shots they gave to the newspapers. They thought it would help them nail the guy, but it never did. So what troubles you? God knew all the pictures troubled me. Even the ones where Gray and the man she was with were just passing in the background, only recognizable by her sleeveless blouse and Alice band, and his baseball cap and dark glasses. In only 2 of them were Linda Gray and her killer sharp and clear. The first showed them at the Whirly Cups, his hand resting casually on the swell of Gray's bottom. In the other, the best of the lot, they were at the Annie Oakley Shooting Gallery. Yet in neither was the man's face really visible. I could have passed him on the street and not known. Aaron plucked up the Whirly Cups photo. Look at his hand. Yeah, the tattoo, I see it, and I heard about it from Mrs. S. What do you make it to be, a hawk or an eagle? I think an eagle, but it doesn't matter. Really? Really. Remember I said I'd come back to Claudine Sharp? A young woman getting her throat cut in the local movie theater during Lawrence of Arabia, no less, was big news in a little town like Rocky Mount. The telegram ran with it for almost a month. The cops turned up exactly one lead, Dev. A girl Claudine went to high school with saw her at the snack bar and said hello. Claudine said hi right back. The girl said there was a man in sunglasses and a baseball cap next to her, but she never thought the guy was with Claudine because he was a lot older. The only reason she noticed him at all was because he was wearing sunglasses in a movie show, and because he had a tattoo on his hand. The bird. No, Dev, it was a Coptic cross, like this. She took out another Xerox sheet and showed me. She told the cops she thought at first it was some kind of Nazi symbol. I looked at the cross. It was elegant, but looked nothing at all like a bird. 2 tats, one on each hand, I said at last. The bird on one, the cross on the other. She shook her head and gave me the Whirly Cups photo again. Which hand's got the bird on it? He was standing on Linda Gray's left, encircling her waist, the hand resting on her bottom. The right. Yes, but the girl who saw him in the movie theater said the cross was on his right. I considered this. She made a mistake, that's all. Witnesses do it all the time. Sure they do. My father could talk all day on that subject. But look, Dev. Aaron handed me this shooting gallery photo, the best of the bunch because they weren't just passing in the background. A roving Hollywood girl had seen them, noted the cute pose, and snapped them, hoping for a sale. Only the guy had given her the brush-off, a hard brush-off, according to Mrs. Shoplaw. That made me remember how she described the photo. Him snuggled up to her hip to hip, showing her how to hold the rifle the way guys always do. The version Mrs. S. saw would have been a fuzzy newspaper reproduction, made up of little dots. This was the original. So sharp and clear, I almost felt I could step into it and warn the gray girl. He was snuggled up to her, his hand over hers on the barrel of the BB shooting .22, helping her aim. It was his left hand, and there was no tattoo on it. Aaron said, You see it, don't you? There's nothing to see. That's the point, Dev. That's exactly the point. Are you saying that it was 2 different guys? That one with a cross on his hand killed Claudine Sharp, and another one, a guy with a bird on his hand, killed Linda Gray? That doesn't seem very likely. I couldn't agree more. Then what are you saying? I thought I saw something in one of the photos, but I wasn't sure. So I took the print and the negative to a grad student named Phil Hendren. He's a darkroom genius, practically lives in the Bard photography department. You know those clunky speed graphics we carried? Sure. They were mostly for effect. Cute girls toting old-fashioned cameras, but Phil says they're actually pretty terrific. You can do a lot with these negs. For example, she handed me a blow-up of the Whirly Cups pic. The Hollywood girl's target had been a young couple with a toddler between them, but in this enlarged version they were hardly there. Now, Linda Gray and her murderous date were at the center of the image. Look at his hand, Dev. Look at the tattoo. I did, frowning. It's a little hard to see, I complained. The hand's blurrier than the rest. I don't think so. This time I held the photo close to my eyes. It's... Jesus, Aaron. Is it the ink? Is it running just a little? She gave me a triumphant smile. July of 1969, a hot night in Dixie. Almost everybody was sweating buckets. If you don't believe me, look at some of the other pictures and note the perspiration rings. Plus, he had something else to be sweaty about, didn't he? He had murder on his mind, an audacious one at that. I said, Oh, shit. Pirate Pete's. She pointed a forefinger at me. Bingo. Pirate Pete's was a souvenir shop outside the Splash and Crash, proudly flying a Jolly Roger from its roof. Inside you could get the usual stuff, T-shirts, coffee mugs, beach towels, even a pair of swim trunks if your kid forgot his. Everything imprinted with the Joyland logo. There was also a counter where you could get a wide assortment of fake tattoos. They came on decals. If you didn't feel capable of applying it yourself, Pirate Pete, or one of his greeny minions, would do it for a small surcharge. Aaron was nodding. I doubt he got it there. That would have been dumb, and this guy isn't dumb. But I'm sure it's not a real tattoo. any more than that Coptic cross the girl saw in the Rocky Mount movie theater was a real tattoo. She leaned forward and gripped my arm. You know what I think? I think he does it because it draws attention. People notice the tattoo, and everything else just... She tapped the indistinct shapes that had been the actual subject of this photo before her friend at Bard blew it up. I said, everything else about him just fades into the background. Yep, later he just washes it off. Do the cops know? I have no idea. You could tell them, not me. I'm going back to school, but I'm not sure they'd care at this late date. I shuffled through the photos again. I had no doubt that Aaron had actually discovered something, although I did doubt it would, by itself, be responsible for the capture of the funhouse killer. But there was something else about the photos. Something. You know how sometimes a word gets stuck on the tip of your tongue and just won't come off? It was like that. Have there been any murders like these 5, or these 4 if we leave out Eva Longbottom, since Linda Gray? Did you check? I tried, she said. The short answer is I don't think so, but I can't say for sure. I've read about 50 murders of young girls and women, 50 at least, and haven't found any that fit the parameters. She ticked them off. Always in summer, always as a result of a dating situation with an unknown older man, always the throat cut, and always with some sort of carny connect. Hello, kids. We looked up, startled. It was Fred Dean. Today he was wearing a golfing shirt, bright red baggies, and a long-billed cap with Heaven's Bay Country Club stitched in gold thread above the rim. I was a lot more used to seeing him in a suit, where informality consisted of pulling down his tie and popping the top button of his Van Heusen shirt. Dressed for the links, he looked absurdly young, except for the graying wings of hair at his temples, that was. Hello, Mr. Dean, Erin said, standing up. Most of her paperwork and some of the photographs were still clutched in one hand. The folder was in the other. I don't know if you remember me. Of course I do, he said, approaching. I never forget a Hollywood girl, but sometimes I do mix up the names. Are you Ashley or Jerry? She smiled, put the paperwork back in the folder, and handed it to me. I added the photos I was still holding. I'm Aaron. Of course, Aaron Cook. He dropped me a wink, which was even weirder than seeing him in old-fashioned golfing baggies. You have excellent taste in young ladies, Jonesy. I do, don't I? It seemed too complicated to tell him that Erin was actually Tom Kennedy's girlfriend. Fred probably wouldn't remember Tom anyway, never having seen him in a flirty green dress and high heels. I just stopped by to get the accounts books. Quarterly IRS payments coming up. Such a pain in the hindquarters. Enjoying your little alumna visit, Erin? Yes, sir, very much. Coming back next year? She looked a trifle uncomfortable at that, but stuck gamely to the truth. Probably not. Fair enough, but if you change your mind, I'm sure Brenda Rafferty can find a place for you. He switched his attention to me. This boy you plan to bring to the park, Jonesy. He set a date with his mother? Tuesday. Wednesday or Thursday if it's rainy. The kid can't be out in the rain. Aaron was looking at me curiously. I advise you stick to Tuesday, he said. There's a storm coming up the coast. Not a hurricane, thank God, but a tropical disturbance. Lots of rain and gale-force winds is what they're saying. Supposed to arrive mid-morning on Wednesday. Okay, I said. Thanks for the tip. Nice to see you again, Aaron. He tipped his cap to her and started off toward the back lot. Aaron waited until he was out of sight before bursting into giggles. Those pants, did you see those pants? Yeah, I said. Pretty wild. But I was damned if I was going to laugh at them, or him. According to Lane, Fred Dean held Joyland together with spit, baling wire, and account book wizardry. That being the case, I thought he could wear all the golf baggies he wanted, and at least they weren't checks. What's this about bringing some kid to the park? Long story, I said. I'll tell you while we walk back. So I did, giving her the Boy Scout majoring in modesty version and leaving out the big argument at the hospital. Aaron listened without interruption, asking only one question just as we reached the steps leading up from the beach. Tell me the truth, Dev. Is Mommy foxy? People kept asking me that. That night, Tom and Aaron went out to Surfer Joe's, a beer and boogie bar where they had spent more than a few off nights during the summer. Tom invited me along, but I heeded that old saying about 2 being company and 3 being you-know-what. Besides, I doubted if they'd find the same raucous, party-hardy atmosphere. In towns like Heaven's Bay, there's a big difference between July and October. In my role as Big Brother, I even said so. "You don't understand, Ev," Tom said. "Me and Aaron don't go looking for the fun. We bring the fun. It's what we learned last summer." Nevertheless, I heard them coming up the stairs early, and almost sober from the sound of them. Yet there were whispers and muffled laughter, sounds that made me feel a little lonely. Not for Wendy, just for someone. Looking back on it, I suppose even that was a step forward. I read through Aaron's notes while they were gone, but found nothing new. I set them aside after 15 minutes and went back to the photographs. Crisp, black and white images, taken by your Joyland Hollywood girl. At first, I just shuffled through them. Then I sat on the floor and laid them out in a square, moving them from place to place like a guy trying to put a puzzle together, which was, I suppose, exactly what I was doing. Aaron was troubled by the Carney connection and the tattoos that probably weren't real tattoos at all. Those things troubled me as well, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite get. It was maddening because I felt like it was staring me right in the face. Finally, I put all but 2 of the photos back in the folder, the key 2. These I held up, looking first at one, then the other. Linda Gray and her killer waiting in line at the Whirly Cups. Linda Gray and her killer at the shooting gallery. Never mind the goddamn tattoo, I told myself. It's not that. It's something else. But what else could it be? The sunglasses masked his eyes. The goatee masked his lower face, and the slightly tilted bill of the baseball cap shaded his forehead and eyebrows. The Caps logo showed a catfish peering out of a big red sea, the insignia of a South Carolina minor league team called the Mudcats. Dozens of Mudcat lids went through the park every day at the height of the season, so many that we called them fish tops instead of dog tops. The bastard could hardly have picked a more anonymous lid, and surely that was the idea. Back and forth I went, from the Whirly Cups to the shooting gallery, and then back to the Whirly Cups again. At last I tossed the photos in the folder and threw the folder on my little desk. I read until Tom and Aaron came in, then went to bed. Maybe it'll come to me in the morning, I thought. I'll wake up and say, "Oh shit, of course." The sound of the incoming waves slipped me into sleep. I dreamed I was on the beach with Annie and Mike. Annie and I were standing with our feet in the surf, our arms around each other, watching Mike fly his kite. He was paying out twine and running after it. He could do that because there was nothing wrong with him. He was fine. I had only dreamed that stuff about Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. I woke up early because I had forgotten to pull down the shade. I went to the folder, pulled out those 2 photographs, and stared at them in the day's first sunlight, positive I'd see the answer. But I didn't. A harmony of scheduling had allowed Tom and Aaron to travel from New Jersey to North Carolina together, but when it comes to train schedules, harmony is the exception rather than the rule. The only ride they got together on Sunday was the one from Heavens Bay to Wilmington in my Ford. Aaron's train left for upstate New York in Annandale and Hudson 2 hours before Tom's Coastal Express was due to whisk him back to New Jersey. I tucked a check in her jacket pocket, interlibrary loans and long distance. She fished it out, looked at the amount, and tried to hand it back. $80 is too much, Dev. Considering all you found out, it's not enough. Take it, Lieutenant Colombo. She laughed, put it back in her pocket, and kissed me goodbye. Another brother-sister quickie, nothing like the one we'd shared that night at the end of the summer. She spent considerably longer in Tom's arms. Promises were made about Thanksgiving at Tom's parents' home in western Pennsylvania. I could tell he didn't want to let her go. But when the loudspeakers announced last call for Richmond, Baltimore, Wilkes-Barre, and points north, he finally did. When she was gone, Tom and I strolled across the street and had an early dinner in a not-too-bad ribs joint. I was contemplating the dessert selection when he cleared his throat and said, "Listen, Dev." Something in his voice made me look up in a hurry. His cheeks were even more flushed than usual. I put the menu down. "This stuff you've had Erin doing, I think it should stop. It's bothering her, and I think she's neglecting her coursework." He laughed, glanced out the window at the train station bustle, looked back at me. "I sound more like her dad than her boyfriend, don't I?" "You sound concerned, that's all. Like you care for her." "Care for her? Buddy, I'm head over heels in love. She's the most important thing in my life. What I'm saying here isn't jealousy talking, though. I don't want you to get that idea. Here's the thing. If she's going to transfer and still hold on to her financial aid, she can't let her grades slip. You see that, don't you?" Yes, I could see that. I could see something else, too, even if Tom couldn't. He wanted her away from Joyland in mind as well as body, because something had happened to him there that he couldn't understand, nor did he want to, which, in my opinion, made him sort of a fool. That dour flush of envy ran through me again, causing my stomach to clench around the food it was trying to digest. Then I smiled. It was an effort, I won't kid you about that, and said, "Message received. As far as I'm concerned, our little research project is over." So relax, Thomas. You can stop thinking about what happened in Horror House and about what you saw there. Good. We're still friends, right? I reached across the table. Friends to the end, I said. We shook on it. The Wiggle Waggle Village's story stage had 3 backdrops: Prince Charming's castle, Jack's magic beanstalk, and a starry night sky featuring the Carolina Spin outlined in red neon. All 3 had sun-faded over the course of the summer. I was in the Wiggle Waggle's small backstage area on Monday morning, touching them up, and hoping not to fuck them up. I was no Van Gogh, when one of the part-time Gazunis arrived with a message from Fred Dean. I was wanted in his office. I went with some unease, wondering if I was going to get a reaming for bringing Aaron into the park on Saturday. I was surprised to find Fred dressed not in one of his suits or his amusing golf outfit, but in faded jeans and an equally faded Joyland t-shirt, the short sleeves rolled up to show some real muscle. There was a paisley sweatband cinched around his brow. He didn't look like an accountant or the park's chief employment officer. He looked like a ride jock. He registered my surprise and smiled. "Like the outfit? I must admit I do. It's the way I dressed when I caught on with the Blitz Brothers show in the Midwest back in the 50s. My mother was okay with the Blitzies, but my dad was horrified. And he was Carney." "I know," I said. He raised his eyebrows. "Really? Word gets around, doesn't it? Anyway, there's a lot to do this afternoon." "Just give me a list. I'm almost done painting the backdrops and the—" "Not at all, Jonesy. You're signing out at noon today, and I don't want to see you until tomorrow morning at 9 when you turn up with your guests. Don't worry about your paycheck either. I'll see you're not docked for the hours you miss." "What's this about, Fred?" He gave me a smile I couldn't interpret. "It's a surprise." That Monday was warm and sunny, and Annie and Mike were having lunch at the end of the boardwalk when I walked back to Heaven's Bay. Milo saw me coming and raced to meet me. "Dev!" Mike called. "Come and have a sandwich. We got plenty." "No, I really shouldn't." "We insist," Annie said. Then her brow furrowed. "Unless you're sick or something, I don't want Mike to catch a bug." "I'm fine. Just got sent home early. Mr. Dean, he's my boss. He wouldn't tell me why. He said it was a surprise. It's got something to do with tomorrow, I guess." I looked at her with some anxiety. "We're still on for tomorrow, right?" "Yes," she said. "When I surrender, I surrender. Just, we're not going to tire him out, are we, Dev?" "Mom," Mike said. She paid him no mind. "Are we?" "No, ma'am." Although seeing Fred Dean dressed up like a Carney road dog with all those unsuspected muscles showing had made me uneasy. Had I made it clear to him how fragile Mike's health was? I thought so, but... "Then come up here and have a sandwich," she said. "I hope you like egg salad." I didn't sleep well on Monday night, half convinced that the tropical storm Fred had mentioned would arrive early and wash out Mike's trip to the park, but Tuesday dawned cloudless. I crept down to the parlor, turned on the TV in time to get the 6:45 weathercast on WECT. The storm was still coming, but the only people who were going to feel it today were the ones living in coastal Florida and Georgia. I hoped Mr. Easterbrook had packed his galoshes. "You're up early," Mrs. Shoplaw said, poking her head in from the kitchen. "I was just making scrambled eggs and bacon. Come have some." "I'm not that hungry, Mrs. S." "Nonsense, you're still a growing boy, Devin, and you need to eat. Aaron told me what you got going on today, and I think you're doing a wonderful thing. It will be fine." "I hope you're right," I said, but I kept thinking of Fred Dean in his work clothes, Fred who'd sent me home early, Fred who had a surprise planned. We had made our arrangements at lunch the day before, and when I turned my old car into the driveway of the big green Victorian at 8:30 on Tuesday morning, Annie and Mike were ready to go. So was Milo. "Are you sure nobody will mind us bringing him?" Mike had asked on Monday. "I don't want to get into trouble." Service dogs are allowed in Joyland, I said. And Milo's going to be a service dog. Aren't you, Milo? Milo had cocked his head, apparently unfamiliar with the service dog concept. Today, Mike was wearing his huge, clanky braces. I moved to help him into the van, but he waved me off and did it himself. It took a lot of effort, and I expected a coughing fit, but none came. He was practically bouncing with excitement. Annie, looking impossibly long-legged in Lee Riders, handed me the van keys. You drive. And lowering her voice so Mike wouldn't hear, I'm too goddamn nervous to do it. I was nervous too. I'd bulldozed her into this, after all. I had help from Mike, true, but I was the adult. If it went wrong, it would be on me. I wasn't much for prayer, but as I loaded Mike's crutches and wheelchair into the back of the van, I sent one up that nothing would go wrong. Then I backed out of the driveway, turned onto Beach Drive, and drove past the billboard reading, Bring your kids to Joyland for the time of their lives. Annie was in the passenger seat, and I thought she had never looked more beautiful than she did that October morning, in her faded jeans and a light sweater, her hair tied back with a hank of blue yarn. Thank you for this, Dev, she said. I just hope we're doing the right thing. We are, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt, because now that it was a done deal, I had my doubts. The Joyland sign was lit up. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that the summertime Get Happy music was playing through the loudspeakers, a sonic parade of late 60s and early 70s hits. I had intended to park in one of the Lot A handicap spaces. They were only 50 feet or so from the park entrance. But before I could do so, Fred Dean stepped through the open gate and beckoned us forward. Today he wasn't wearing just any suit, but the three-piecer he saved for the occasional celebrity who raided a VIP tour. The suit I had seen, but never the black silk top hat, which looked like the kind you saw diplomats wearing in old newsreel footage. Is this usual? Annie asked. Sure, I said, a trifle giddily. None of it was usual. I drove through the gate and onto Joyland Avenue, pulling up next to the park bench outside the Wiggle Waggle Village where I had once sat with Mr. Easterbrook after my first turn as Howie. Mike wanted to get out of the van the way he had gotten in, by himself. I stood by, ready to catch him if he lost his balance, while Annie hoisted the wheelchair out of the back. Milo sat at my feet, tail thumping, ears cocked, eyes bright. As Annie rolled the wheelchair up, Fred approached in a cloud of aftershave. He was resplendent. There's really no other word for it. He took off his hat, bowed to Annie, then held out a hand. You must be Mike's mother. You have to remember that Ms. wasn't common usage back then, and nervous as I was, I took a moment to appreciate how deftly he had avoided the Miss-Mrs. dichotomy. I am, she said. I don't know if she was flustered by his courtliness or by the difference in the way they were dressed. She amusement park casual, he state visit formal, but flustered she was. She shook his hand, though. And this young man is Michael. He offered his hand to the wide-eyed boy standing there in his steel supports. Thank you for coming today. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having us. He shook Fred's hand. This place is huge. It wasn't, of course. Disney World is huge. But to a 10-year-old who had never been to an amusement park, it had to look that way. For a moment I could see it through his eyes, see it new, and my doubts about bringing him began to melt away. Fred bent down to examine the third member of the Ross family, hands on his knees. And you're Milo. Milo barked. Yes, Fred said. And I'm equally pleased to meet you. He held out his hand, waiting for Milo to raise his paw. When he did, Fred shook it. How do you know our dog's name? Annie asked. Did Dev tell you? He straightened, smiling. He did not. I know because this is a magic place, my dear. For instance, he showed her his empty hands and put them behind his back. Which hand? Left, Annie said, playing along. Fred brought out his left hand, empty. She rolled her eyes, smiling. Okay, right. This time, he brought out a dozen roses. Real ones. Annie and Mike gasped. Me too. All these years later, I have no idea how he did it. Joyland is for children, my dear. And since today Mike is the only child here, this park belongs to him. These, however, are for you." She took them like a woman in a dream, burying her face in the blooms, smelling their sweet red dust. "I'll put them in the van for you," I said. She held them a moment longer, then passed them to me. "Mike," Fred said, "do you know what we sell here?" He looked uncertain. "Rides? Rides and games?" "We sell fun. So what do you say we have some?" I remember Mike's day at the park, Annie's day too, as if it happened last week. But it would take a correspondent much more talented than I am to tell you how it felt, or to explain how it could have ended the last hold Wendy Keegan still held over my heart and my emotions. All I can say is what you already know. Some days are treasure. Not many, but I think in almost every life there are a few. That was one of mine. And when I'm blue, when life comes down on me and everything looks tawdry and cheap the way Joyland Avenue did on a rainy day, I go back to it, if only to remind myself that life isn't always a butcher's game. Sometimes the prizes are real. Sometimes they're precious. Of course, not all the rides were running, and that was okay, because there were a lot of them Mike couldn't handle. But more than half of the park was operational that morning. The lights, the music, even some of the shies, where a half-dozen gazoonies were on duty selling popcorn, fries, sodas, cotton candy, and puppalicious dogs. I have no idea how Fred and Lane pulled it off in a single afternoon, but they did. We started in the village, where Lane was waiting beside the engine of the Choo-Choo Wiggle. He was wearing a pillow-tick engineer's cap instead of his derby, but it was cocked at the same insouciant angle. Of course it was. "All aboard! This is a ride that makes kids happy, so get on board and make it snappy. Dogs ride free, moms ride free, kids ride up in the engine with me." He pointed at Mike, then to the passenger seat in the engine. Mike got out of his chair, set his crutches, then tottered on them. Annie started for him. "No, Mom, I'm okay. I can do it." He got his balance and clanked to where Lane was standing, a real boy with robot legs, and allowed Lane to boost him into the passenger seat. "Is that the cord that blows the whistle? Can I pull it?" "That's what it's there for," Lane said. "But watch out for pigs on the tracks. There's a wolf in the area, and they're scared to death of 'em." Annie and I sat in one of the cars. Her eyes were bright. Roses all her own burned in her cheeks. Her lips, though tightly pressed together, were trembling. "You okay?" I asked her. "Yes." She took my hand, laced her fingers through mine, and squeezed almost tight enough to hurt. "Yes, yes, yes." "Controls green across the board," Lane cried. "Check me on that, Michael." "Check. Watch out for what on the tracks?" "Pigs." "Kid, you got a style that makes me smile. Give that yellow rope a yank and we're off." Mike yanked the cord, the whistle howled, Milo barked. The air brakes chuffed and the train began to move. Choo-Choo Wiggle was strictly a Zamp ride, okay? All the rides in the village were Zamps, meant mostly for boys and girls between the ages of 3 and 7. But you have to remember how seldom Mike Ross had gotten out, especially since his pneumonia the year before, and how many days he had sat with his mother at the end of that boardwalk, listening to the rumble of the rides and the happy screams coming from down the beach, knowing that stuff wasn't for him. What was for him was more gasping for air as his lungs failed, more coughing, a gradual inability to walk even with the aid of crutches and braces, and finally the bed where he would die, wearing diapers under his PJs and an oxygen mask over his face. Wiggle Waggle Village was sort of depopulated with no greenies to play the fairy tale parts, but Fred and Lane had reactivated all the mechanicals. The magic beanstalk that shot out of the ground in a burst of steam, the witch cackling in front of the candy house, the Mad Hatter's tea party, the nightcap-wearing wolf who lurked beneath one of the underpasses and sprang at the train as it passed. As we rounded the final turn, we passed 3 houses all kids know well, one of straw, one of sticks, and one of bricks. "Watch out for pigs!" Lane cried, and just then they came waddling onto the tracks, uttering amplified oinks. Mike shrieked with laughter and yanked the whistle. As always, the pigs escaped. Barely. When we pulled back into the station, Annie let go of my hand and hurried up to the engine. "Are you okay, hon? Want your inhaler?" "No, I'm fine." Mike turned to Lane. "Thanks, Mr. Engineer." "My pleasure, Mike." He held out a hand, palm up. "Slap me 5 if you're still alive." Mike did, and with gusto. I doubt if he'd ever felt more alive. "Now I've got to move on," Lane said. "Today I'm a man of many hats." He dropped me a wink. Annie vetoed the whirly cups, but allowed Mike, not without apprehension, to ride the chair-planes. She gripped my arm even harder than she had my hand when the chair rose 30 feet above the ground and began to tilt, then loosened up again when she heard him laughing. "God," she said, "look at his hair, how it flies out behind him." She was smiling. She was also crying, but didn't seem aware of it, nor of my arm, which had found its way around her waist. Fred was running the controls and knew enough to keep the ride at half speed, rather than bringing it all the way up to full, which would have had Mike parallel to the ground, held in only by centrifugal force. When he finally came back to Earth, the kid was too dizzy to walk. Annie and I each took an arm and guided him to the wheelchair. Fred toted Mike's crutches. "Oh, man." It seemed to be all he could say. "Oh, man. Oh, man." The dizzy speedboats, a land ride in spite of its name, was next. Mike rode over the painted water in one with Milo, both of them clearly loving it. Annie and I took another one. Although I had been working at Joyland for over 4 months by then, I had never been on this ride, and I yelled the first time I saw us rushing prow first at Mike and Milo's boat, only to sheer off at the last second. "Wimp," Annie shouted in my ear. When we got off, Mike was breathing hard but still not coughing. We rolled him up Hound Dog Way and grabbed sodas. The Gazoonie refused to take the 5-spot Annie held out. "Everything's on the house today, ma'am." "Can I have a pup, Mom, and some cotton candy?" She frowned, then sighed and shrugged. "Okay, just as long as you understand that stuff is still off limits, Buster. Today's an exception and no more fast rides." He wheeled ahead to the Pupalicious Shy, his own pup trotting beside him. She turned to me. "It's not about nutrition, if that's what you're thinking. If he gets sick to his stomach, he might vomit, and vomiting is dangerous for kids in Mike's condition. I kissed her. Just a gentle brush of my lips across hers. It was like swallowing a tiny drop of something incredibly sweet. "Hush," I said. "Does he look sick?" Her eyes got very large. For a moment I felt positive that she was going to slap me and walk away. The day would be ruined, and it would be my own stupid goddamn fault. Then she smiled, looking at me in a speculative way, and then made my stomach feel light. "I bet you could do better than that if you had half a chance." Before I could think of a reply, she was hurrying after her son. It really would have made no difference if she had hung around, because I was totally flummoxed. Annie, Mike, and Milo crowded into one car of the gondola glide, which crossed above the whole park on a diagonal. Fred, Dean, and I rode beneath them in one of the electric carts, with Mike's wheelchair tucked in back. "Seems like a terrific kid," Fred commented. "He is, but I never expected you to go all out like this." "That's for you as much as for him. You've done the park more good than you seem to know, Deb. When I told Mr. Easterbrook I wanted to go big, he gave me the green light." "You called him?" "I did indeed." "That thing with the roses, how'd you pull it off?" Fred shot his cuffs and looked modest. "A magician never tells his secrets. Don't you know that?" "Did you have a card and bunny gig when you were with the Blitz Brothers?" "No, sir, I did not. All I did with the Blitzies was ride, jock, and drag the midway. And although I did not have a valid driver's license, I also drove a truck on a few occasions when we had a DS from some rude branch or another in the dead of night." "So where did you learn the magic?" Fred reached behind my ear, pulled out a silver dollar, and dropped it into my lap. "Here and there, all around the square. Better goose it, little Jonesy, they're getting ahead of us." From Skytop Station, where the gondola ride ended, we went to the merry-go-round. Lane Hardy was waiting. He had lost the engineer's cap and was once more sporting his derby. The park's loudspeakers were still pumping out rock and roll, but under the wide, flaring canopy of what's known in the talk as the spinning Jenny, the rock was drowned out by the calliope playing A Bicycle Built for Two. It was recorded, but still sweet and old-fashioned. Before Mike could mount the dish, Fred dropped to one knee and regarded him gravely. "You can't ride the Jenny without a Joyland hat," he said. "We call 'em dog tops. You got one?" "No," Mike said. He still wasn't coughing, but dark patches had begun to creep out beneath his eyes. Where his cheeks weren't flushed with excitement, he looked pale. I didn't know I was supposed to... Fred took off his own hat, peered inside, showed it to us. It was empty, as all magicians' top hats must be when they are displayed to the audience. He looked into it again and brightened. Ah! He brought out a brand-new Joyland dog top and put it on Mike's head. Perfect. Now which beast do you want to ride? A horse? The unicorn? Marva the mermaid? Leo the lion? Yes, the lion, please, Mike cried. Mom, you ride the tiger right next to me. You bet, she said. I've always wanted to ride a tiger. Hey, champ, Lane said. Let me help you up the ramp. While he did that, Annie lowered her voice and spoke to Fred. Not a lot more, okay? It's all great, a day he'll never forget, but... He's fading, Fred said. I understand. Annie mounted the snarling, green-eyed tiger next to Mike's lion. Milo sat between them, grinning a doggy grin. As the merry-go-round started to move, a bicycle built for two gave way to 12th Street Rag. Fred put his hand on my shoulder. You'll want to meet us at the spin. We'll make that his last ride, but you need to visit the costume shop first, and put some hustle into it. I started to ask why, then realized I didn't need to. I headed for the back lot, and yes, I put some hustle into it. That Tuesday morning, in October of 1973, was the last time I wore the fur. I put it on in the costume shop and used Joyland Under to get back to the middle of the park, pushing one of the electric carts as fast as it would go, my Howie head bouncing up and down on one shoulder. I surfaced behind Madame Fortuna's Shy just in time. Lane, Annie, and Mike were coming up the midway. Lane was pushing Mike's chair. None of them saw me peering around the corner of the Shy. They were looking at the Carolina spin, their necks craned. Fred saw me, though. I had raised a paw. He nodded, then turned and raised his own paw to whoever was currently watching from the little sound booth above customer services. Seconds later, Howie music rolled from all the speakers. First up was Elvis, singing Hound Dog. I leaped from cover, going into my Howie dance, which was kind of a fucked-up soft shoe. Mike gaped. Annie clapped her hands to her temples as if she'd suddenly been afflicted with a monster headache, then started laughing. I believe what followed was one of my better performances. I hopped and skipped around Mike's chair, hardly aware that Milo was doing the same thing, only in the other direction. Hound Dog gave way to the Rolling Stones' version of Walking the Dog. That's a pretty short song, which was good. I hadn't realized how out of shape I was. I finished by throwing my arms wide and yelling, Mike! 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 That was the only time Howie ever talked, and all I can say in my defense is that it really sounded more like a bark. Mike rose from his chair, opened his arms, and fell forward. He knew I'd catch him, and I did. Kids half his age had given me the Howie hug all summer long, but no hug had ever felt so good. I only wished I could turn him around and squeeze him the way I had Haley Stansfield, expelling what was wrong with him like an aspirated chunk of hot dog. Face buried in the fur, he said, You make a really good Howie, Dev. I rubbed his head with one paw, knocking off his dog top. I couldn't reply as Howie. Barking his name was as close as I could come to that. But I was thinking, a good kid deserves a good dog. Just ask Milo. Mike looked up into Howie's blue mesh eyes. Will you come on the hoister with us? I gave him an exaggerated nod and patted his head again. Lane picked up Mike's new dog top and stuck it back on his head. Annie approached. Her hands were clasped demurely at her waist, but her eyes were full of merriment. Can I unzip you, Mr. Howie? I wouldn't have minded, but of course I couldn't let her. Every show has its rules, and one of Joyland's hard and fast was that Howie the Happy Hound was always Howie the Happy Hound. You never took off the fur where the conies could see. I ducked back into Joyland Under, left the fur in the cart, and rejoined Annie and Mike at the ramp leading up to the Carolina spin. Annie looked up nervously and said, Are you sure you want to do this, Mike? Yes, it's the one I want to do most. All right, then, I guess. To me, she added, I'm not terrified of heights, but they don't exactly thrill me. Lane was holding a car door open. Climb aboard, folks. I'm going to send you up where the air is rare. He bent down and scruffed Milo's ears. You're sitting this one out, fella. I sat on the inside nearest the wheel. Annie sat in the middle and Mike on the outside where the view was best. Lane dropped the safety bar, went back to the controls, and reset his derby on a fresh slant. "Amazement awaits," he called, and up we went, rising with the stately calm of a coronation procession. Slowly, the world opened itself beneath us, first the park, then the bright cobalt of the ocean on our right and all of the North Carolina lowlands on our left. When the spin reached the top of its great circle, Mike let go of the safety bar, raised his hands over his head, and shouted, "We're flying!" A hand on my leg, Annie's. I looked at her and she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I don't know how many times Lane sent us around, more spins than the usual ride, I think, but I'm not sure. What I remember best was Mike's face, pale and full of wonder, and Annie's hand on my thigh where it seemed to burn. She didn't take it away until we slowed to a stop. Mike turned to me. "Now I know what my kite feels like," he said. So did I. When Annie told Mike he had had enough, the kid didn't object. He was exhausted. As Lane helped him into his wheelchair, Mike held out a hand, palm up. "Slap me 5 if you're still alive." Grinning, Lane slapped him 5. "Come back any time, Mike." "Thanks. It was so great." Lane and I pushed him up the midway. The booths on both sides were shut up again, but one of the shies was open, Annie Oakley's shooting gallery. Standing at the chump board where Pop Allen had stood all summer long was Fred Dean in his 3-piece suit. Behind him, chain-driven rabbits and ducks traveled in opposite directions. Above them were bright yellow ceramic chicks. These were stationary but very small. "Like to try your shooting skill before you exit the park?" Fred asked. "There are no losers today. Today, everybody wins a prize." Mike looked around at Annie. "Can I, Mom?" "Sure, honey, but not long, okay?" He tried to get out of the chair, but couldn't. He was too tired. Lane and I propped him up, one on each side. Mike picked up a rifle and took a couple of shots, but he could no longer steady his arms, even though the gun was light. The BBs struck the canvas backdrop and clicked into the gutter at the bottom. "Guess I suck," he said, putting the rifle down. "Well, you didn't exactly burn it up," Fred allowed. "But as I said, today everyone wins a prize." With that, he handed over the biggest Howie on the shelf, a top stuffy that even sharpshooters couldn't earn without spending $8 or $9 on reloads. Mike thanked him and sat back down, looking overwhelmed. That damn stuffed dog was almost as big as he was. "You try, Mom." "No, that's okay," she said. But I thought she wanted to. It was something in her eyes as she measured the distance between the chump board and the targets. "Please?" He looked first at me, then at Lane. "She's really good. She won the prone shooting tournament at Camp Perry before I was born and came in second twice. Camp Perry's in Ohio." "I don't—" Lane was already holding out one of the modified 22s. "Step right up. Let's see your best Annie Oakley, Annie." She took the rifle and examined it in a way few conies ever did. "How many shots?" 10 a clip, Fred said. "If I'm going to do this, can I shoot 2 clips?" "As many as you want, ma'am. Today's your day." "Mom used to also shoot skeet with my grandpa," Mike told them. Annie raised the 22 and squeezed off 10 shots with a pause of perhaps 2 seconds between each. She knocked over 2 moving ducks and 3 of the moving bunnies. The teensy ceramic chicks she ignored completely. "A crack shot," Fred crowed. "Any prize on the middle shelf. Your pick." She smiled. 50% isn't anywhere near crack. My dad would have covered his face for shame. "I'll just take the reload if that's okay." Fred took a paper cone from under the counter, a wee shoot in the talk, and put the small end into a hole on top of the gag rifle. There was a rattle as another 10 BBs rolled in. "Are the sights on these trigged?" she asked Fred. "No, ma'am. All the games at Joyland are straight. But if I told you Pop Allen, the man who usually runs this shy, spent long hours sighting them in, I'd be a liar." Having worked on Pop's team, I knew that was disingenuous to say the least. Sighting the rifles was the last thing that Pop would do. The better the rube shot, the more prizes Pop had to give away, and he had to buy his own prizes. All the shy bosses did. They were cheap goods, but not free goods. "Shoots left and high," she said more to herself than to us. Then she raised the rifle, socked it into the hollow of her right shoulder, and triggered off 10 rounds. This time there was no discernible pause between the shots, and she didn't bother with ducks and bunnies. She aimed for the ceramic chicks and exploded 8 of them. As she put the gun back on the counter, Lane used his bandana to wipe a smudge of sweat and grime from the back of his neck. He spoke very softly as he did this chore. Jesus, Horatio Christ. Nobody gets 8 beeps. I only nicked the last one, and at this range I should have had them all. She wasn't boasting, just stating a fact. Mike said almost apologetically, "Told you she was good." He curled a fist over his mouth and coughed into it. "She was thinking about the Olympics, only then she dropped out of college." "You really are Annie Oakley," Lane said, stuffing his bandana back into a rear pocket. "Any prize, pretty lady. You pick." "I already have my prize," she said. "This has been a wonderful, wonderful day. I can never thank you guys enough." She turned in my direction. "And this guy, who actually had to talk me into it because I'm a fool." She kissed the top of Mike's head. "But now I better get my boy home. Where's Milo?" We looked around and saw him halfway down Joyland Avenue, sitting in front of Horror House with his tail curled around his paws. "Milo, come!" Annie called. His ears pricked up, but he didn't come. He didn't even turn in her direction, just stared at the facade of Joyland's only dark ride. I could almost believe he was reading the drippy cobweb-festooned invitation. "Come in if you dare." While Annie was looking at Milo, I stole a glance at Mike. Although he was all but done in from the excitements of the day, his expression was hard to mistake. It was satisfaction. I know it's crazy to think that he and his Jack Russell had worked this out in advance, but I did think it. I still do. "Roll me down there, Mom," Mike said. "He'll come with me." "No need for that," Lane said. "If you've got a leash, I'm happy to go get him." "It's in the pocket on the back of Mike's wheelchair," Annie said. Probably not," Mike said. "You can check, but I'm pretty sure I forgot it." Annie checked while I thought, "And a pig's ass you did." "Oh, Mike," Annie said reproachfully. "Your dog, your responsibility. How many times have I told you?" "Sorry, Mom." To Fred and Lane, he said, "Only we hardly ever use it because Milo always comes." "Except when we need him to." Annie cupped her hands around her mouth. "Milo, come on! Time to go home!" Then in a much sweeter voice, "Biscuit, Milo, come get a biscuit." Her coaxing tone would have brought me on the run, probably with my tongue hanging out, but Milo didn't budge. "Come on, Dev," Mike said as if I were also in on the plan but had missed my cue somehow. I grabbed the wheelchair's handles and rolled Mike down Joyland Avenue toward the funhouse. Annie followed. Fred and Lane stayed where they were, Lane leaning on the chump board among the laid-out pop guns on their chains. He had removed his derby and was spinning it on one finger. When we got to the dog, Annie regarded him crossly. "What's wrong with you, Milo?" Milo thumped his tail at the sound of Annie's voice, but didn't look at her, nor did he move. He was on guard and intended to stay that way unless he was hauled away. "Michael, please make your dog heal so we can go home. You need to get some 2 things happened before she could finish. I'm not exactly sure of the sequence. I've gone over it often in the years since then, most often on nights when I can't sleep, and I'm still not sure. I think the rumble came first, the sound of a ride car starting to roll along its track, but it might have been the padlock dropping. It's even possible that both things happened at the same time. The big American Master fell off the double doors below the Horror House facade and lay on the boards, gleaming in the October sunshine. Fred Dean said later that the shackle must not have been pushed firmly into the locking mechanism, and the vibration of the moving car caused it to open all the way. This made perfect sense because the shackle was indeed open when I checked it. Still bullshit, though. I put that padlock on myself and remember the click as the shackle clicked into place. I even remember tugging on it to make sure it caught the way you do with a padlock. And all that begs a question Fred didn't even try to answer. With the Horror House breakers switched off, how could that car have gotten rolling in the first place? As for what happened next, here's how a trip through Horror House ended. On the far side of the torture chamber, just when you thought the ride was over and your guard was down, a screaming skeleton, nicknamed Hagar the Horrible by the Greenies, came flying at you, seemingly on a collision course with your car. When it pulled away, you saw a stone wall dead ahead. Painted there in fluorescent green was a rotting zombie in a gravestone with "End of the Line" printed on it. Of course, the stone wall split open just in time, but that final double punch was extremely effective. When the car emerged into the daylight, making a semicircle before going back in through another set of double doors and stopping, even grown men were often screaming their heads off. Those final shrieks, always accompanied by gales of "oh shit, you got me" laughter, were Horror House's best advertisement. There were no screams that day. Of course not, because when the double doors banged open, the car that emerged was empty. It rolled through the semicircle, bumped lightly against the next set of double doors, and stopped. "Okay," Mike said. It was a whisper so low that I barely heard it, and I'm sure Annie didn't. All her attention had been drawn to the car. The kid was smiling. "What made it do that?" Annie asked. "I don't know," I said. "Short circuit, maybe, or some kind of power surge?" Both of those explanations sounded good, as long as you didn't know about the breakers being off. I stood on my tiptoes and peered into the stalled car. The first thing I noticed was that the safety bar was up. If Eddie Parks or one of his greeny minions forgot to lower it, the bar was supposed to snap down automatically once the ride was in motion. It was a state-mandated safety feature. The bar being up on this one made a goofy kind of sense, though, since the only rides in the park that had power that morning were the ones that Lane and Fred had turned on for Mike. I spotted something beneath the semicircular seat, something as real as the roses Fred had given Annie, only not red. It was a blue Alice band. We headed back to the van. Milo, once more on his best behavior, padded along beside Mike's wheelchair. "I'll be back as soon as I get them home," I told Fred. "Put in some extra hours." He shook his head. "You're 86 for today. Get to bed early and be here tomorrow at 6. Pack a couple of extra sandwiches, because we'll all be working late. Turns out that storm's moving a little faster than the weather forecast is expected." Annie looked alarmed. "Should I pack some stuff and take Mike to town, do you think? I'd hate to when he's so tired, but—" "Check the radio this evening," Fred advised. "If no issues of coastal evacuation order, you'll hear it in plenty of time, but I don't think that'll happen. This is just going to be your basic cap of wind. I'm a little worried about the high rides, that's all, the thunderball, the shaker, and the spin." "They'll be okay," Lane said. "They stood up to Agnes last year, and that was a bona fide hurricane." "Does this storm have a name?" Mike asked. "They're calling it Gilda," Lane said. "But it's no hurricane, just a little old subtropical depression." Fred said, "Winds are supposed to start picking up around midnight, and the heavy rain will start an hour or two later. Lane's probably right about the big rides, but it's still going to be a busy day. Have you got a slicker, Dev?" "Sure. You'll want to wear it." The weather forecast we heard on WKLM as we left the park eased Annie's mind. The winds generated by Gilda weren't expected to top 30 miles an hour, with occasionally higher gusts. There might be some beach erosion and minor flooding inland, but that was about it. The DJ called it great kite-flying weather, which made us all laugh. We had a history now, and that was nice. Mike was almost asleep by the time we arrived back at the big Victorian on Beach Row. I lifted him into his wheelchair. Wasn't much of a chore. I'd put on muscle in the last 4 months, and with those horrible braces off, he couldn't have weighed 70 pounds. Milo once more paced the chair as I rolled it up the ramp and into the house. Mike needed the toilet, but when his mother tried to take over the wheelchair handles, Mike asked if I'd do it instead. I rolled him into the bathroom, helped him to stand, and eased down his elastic-waisted pants while he held onto the grab bars. I hate it when she has to help me. I feel like a baby. Maybe, but he pissed with a healthy kid's vigor. Then as he leaned forward to push the flush handle, he staggered and almost took a header into the toilet bowl. I had to catch him. "Thanks, Dev. I already washed my hair once today." That made me laugh, and Mike grinned. "I wish we were going to have a hurricane. That'd be boss." "You might not think so if it happened." I was remembering Hurricane Doria 2 years before. It hit New Hampshire and Maine, packing 90-mile-an-hour winds, knocking down trees all over Portsmouth, Kittery, Sanford, and the Berwicks. One big old pine just missed our house. Our basement was flooded, and the power had been out for 4 days. I wouldn't want stuff to fall down at the park, I guess. That's just about the best place in the world. That I've ever been, anyway. Good. Hold on, kid. Let me pull your pants back up. Can't have you mooning your mother." That made him laugh again, only the laughter turned to coughing. Annie took over when we came out, rolling him down the hall to the bedroom. "Don't you sneak out on me, Devin," she called back over her shoulder. Since I had the afternoon off, I had no intention of sneaking out on her if she wanted me to stay a while. I strolled around the parlor, looking at things that were probably expensive but not terribly interesting. Not to a young man of 21, anyway. A huge picture window, almost wall-to-wall, save what would otherwise have been a gloomy room, flooding it with light. The window looked out on the back patio, the boardwalk, and the ocean. I could see the first clouds feathering in from the southeast, but the sky overhead was still bright blue. I remember thinking that I'd made it to the big house after all, although I'd probably never have a chance to count all the bathrooms. I remember thinking about the Alice band, and wondering if Lane would see it when he put the wayward car back under cover. What else was I thinking? That I'd seen a ghost after all, just not of a person. Annie came back. "He wants to see you, but don't stay long." "Okay. Third door on the right." I went down the hall, knocked lightly, and let myself in. Once you got past the grab bars, the oxygen tanks in the corner, and the leg braces standing at steely attention beside the bed, could have been any boy's room. There was no baseball glove and no skateboard propped against the wall, but there were posters of Mark Spitz and Miami Dolphins running back Larry Zonka. In the place of honor above the bed, the Beatles were crossing Abbey Road. There was a faint smell of liniment. Mike looked very small in the bed, all but lost under a green coverlet. Milo was curled up, nose to tail beside him, and Mike was stroking his fur absently. It was hard to believe that this was the same kid who had his hands raised triumphantly over his head at the apogee of the Carolina spin. He didn't look sad, though. He looked almost radiant. "Did you see her, Dev? Did you see her when she left?" I shook my head, smiling. I had been jealous of Tom, but not of Mike. Never of Mike. I wish my grandpa had been there. He would have seen her and heard what she said when she left. "What did she say?" "Thanks. She meant both of us. And she told you to be careful." "Are you sure you didn't hear her? Even a little?" I shook my head again. "No, not even a little." "But you know." His face was too pale and tired, the face of a boy who was very sick, but his eyes were alive and healthy. "You know, don't you?" "Yes." Thinking of the Alice band. "Mike, do you know what happened to her?" "Someone killed her." Very low. "I don't suppose she told you." But there was no need to finish. He was shaking his head. "You need to sleep," I said. "Yeah, I'll feel better after a nap. I always do." His eyes closed and slowly opened again. The spin was the best. The hoister. It's like flying. "Yes," I said. "It is like that. Like being a kite." This time, when his eyes closed, they didn't reopen. I walked to the door as quietly as I could. As I put my hand on the knob, he said, "Be careful, Dev. It's not white." I looked back. He was sleeping. I'm sure he was. Only Milo was watching me. I left, closing the door softly. Annie was in the kitchen. "I'm making coffee, but maybe you'd rather have a beer. I've got Blue Ribbon." "Coffee would be fine." "What do you think of the place?" I decided to tell the truth. "The furnishings are a little elderly for my taste, but I never went to interior decorating school." "Nor did I," she said. "Never even finished college." "Join the club." "Ah, but you will. You'll get over the girl who dumped you, and you'll go back to school, and you'll finish, and you'll march off into a brilliant future." "How do you know about the girl?" "One, you might as well be wearing a sandwich board. 2, Mike knows. He told me. He's been my brilliant future. Once upon a time, I was going to major in anthropology. I was going to win a gold medal at the Olympics. I was going to see strange and fabulous places and be the Margaret Mead of my generation. I was going to write books and do my best to earn back my father's love. Do you know who he is?" "My landlady says he's a preacher." "Indeed he is. Buddy Ross, the man in the white suit. He also has a great head of white hair. He looks like an older version of the man from Glad in the TV ads. Mega church, big radio presence, now TV. Offstage, he's an asshole with a few good points." She poured 2 cups of coffee. "But that's pretty much true of all of us, isn't it?" "I think so." You sound like someone with regrets. It wasn't the politest thing to say, but we were beyond that. I hoped so, at least. She brought the coffee and sat down opposite me. Like the song says, I've had a few. But Mike's a great kid, and give my father this. He's taking care of us financially so I could be with Mike full time. The way I look at it, checkbook love is better than no love at all. I made a decision today. I think it happened when you were wearing that silly costume and doing that silly dance while I was watching Mike laugh. Tell me. I've decided to give my father what he wants, which is to be invited back into my son's life before it's too late. He said terrible things about how God caused Mike's MD to punish me for my supposed sins, but I've got to put that behind me. If I wait for an apology, I'll be waiting for a long time, because in his heart, Dad still believes that's true. I'm sorry. She shrugged as if it were no matter. I was wrong about not letting Mike go to Joyland, and I've been wrong about holding on to my grudges and insisting on some sort of fucked-up quid pro quo. My son isn't goods in a trading post. Do you think 31's too old to grow up, Dev? Ask me when I get there. She laughed. Touché. Excuse me a minute. She was gone for almost 5. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee. When she came back, she was holding her sweater in her right hand. Her stomach was tanned. Her bra was a pale blue, almost matching her faded jeans. Mike's fast asleep, she said. Would you like to go upstairs with me, Devin? Her bedroom was large but plain, as if even after all the months she'd spent there, she'd never fully unpacked. She turned to me and linked her arms around my neck. Her eyes were very wide and very calm. A trace of a smile touched the corners of her mouth, making soft dimples. I bet you could do better if you had half a chance. Remember me saying that? Yes. Is that a bet I'd win? Her mouth was sweet and damp. I could taste her breath. She drew back and said, It can only be this once. You have to understand that. I didn't want to, but I did. Just as long as it's not, She was really smiling now, almost laughing. I could see teeth as well as dimples. As long as it's not a thank you fuck, a mercy fuck, it's not, believe me. The last time I had a kid like you, I was a kid myself. She took my right hand and put it on the silky cup covering her left breast. I could feel the soft, steady beat of her heart. I must not let go of all my daddy issues yet, because I feel delightfully wicked. We kissed again. Her hands dropped to my belt and unbuckled it. There was a soft rasp as my zipper went down, and then the side of her palm was sliding along the hard ridge beneath my shorts. I gasped. Dev? What? Have you ever done this before? Don't you dare lie to me. No. Was she an idiot, this girl of yours? I guess we both were. She smiled, slipped a cool hand inside my underwear, and gripped me. That sure hold, coupled with her gently moving thumb, made all of Wendy's efforts at boyfriend satisfaction seem very minor league. So you're a virgin. Guilty as charged. Good. It wasn't just the once, and that was lucky for me, because the first time lasted, I'm going to say, 8 seconds, maybe 9. I got inside, that much I did manage, but then everything spurted everywhere. I may have been more embarrassed once, the time I blew an ass trumpet while taking communion at Methodist youth camp, but I don't think so. Oh, God, I said and put a hand over my eyes. She laughed, but there was nothing mean about it. In a weird way, I'm flattered. Try to relax. I'm going downstairs for another check on Mike. I'd just as soon he didn't catch me in bed with Howie the Happy Hound. Very funny. I think if I'd blushed any harder, my skin would have caught fire. I think you'll be ready again when I come back. It's the nice thing about being 21, Dev. If you were 17, you'd probably be ready now. She came back with a couple of sodas and an ice bucket, but when she slipped out of her robe and stood there naked, Coke was the last thing I wanted. The second time was quite a bit better. I think I might have managed 4 minutes. Then she began to cry out softly, and I was gone. But what a way to go. We drowsed, Annie with her head pillowed in the hollow of my shoulder. Okay? She asked. So okay, I can't believe it. I didn't see her smile, but I felt it. After all these years, this bedroom finally gets used for something besides sleeping. Doesn't your father ever stay here? Not for a long time, and I only started coming back because Mike loves it here. Sometimes I can face the fact that he's almost certainly going to die, but mostly I can't. I just turn away from it. I make deals with myself. If I don't take him to Joyland, he won't die. If I don't make up with my father so Dad can come and see him, he won't die. If we just stay here, he won't die. A couple of weeks ago, the first time I had to make him put on his coat to go down to the beach, I cried. He asked me what was wrong, and I told him it was my time of the month. He knows what that is. I remembered something Mike had said to her in the hospital parking lot. It doesn't have to be the last good time. But sooner or later, the last good time would come around. It does for all of us. She sat up, wrapping the sheet around her. Remember me saying that Mike turned out to be my future, my brilliant career? Yes. I can't think of another one. Anything beyond Michael is just blank. Who said that in America there are no second acts? I took her hand. Don't worry about Act 2 until Act 1 is over. She slipped her hand free and caressed my face with it. You're young, but not entirely stupid. It was nice of her to say, but I certainly felt stupid. About Wendy, for one thing. But that wasn't the only thing. I found my mind drifting to those damn pictures in Aaron's folder. Something about them. She lay back down. The sheet slipped away from her nipples, and I felt myself begin to stir again. Some things about being 21 were pretty great. The shooting gallery was fun. I forgot how good it is, sometimes just to have that eye and hand thing going on. My father put a rifle in my hands for the first time when I was 6. Just a little single-shot .22. I loved it. Yeah? She was smiling. Yeah, it was our thing. The thing that worked. The only thing, as it turned out. She propped herself up on an elbow. He's been selling that hellfire and brimstone shit since he was a teenager, and it's not just about the money. He got a triple helping of Backroads Gospels from his own parents, and I have no doubt he believes every word of it. You know what, though? He's still a Southern man first and a preacher second. He's got a custom pickup truck that costs $50,000, but a pickup truck is still a pickup truck. He still eats biscuits and gravy at Shoney's. His idea of sophisticated humor is Minnie Pearl and Junior samples. He loves songs about cheating and honky-tonkin', and he loves his guns. I don't care for his brand of Jesus, and I have no interest in owning a pickup truck. But the guns? That he passed on to his only daughter. I go bang-bang and feel better. Shitty legacy, huh? I said nothing, only got out of bed and opened the Cokes. I gave one to her. He's probably got 50 guns at his full-time place in Savannah, most of them valuable antiques, and there's another half-dozen in the safe here. I've got 2 rifles of my own at my place in Chicago, although I hadn't shot at a target for 2 years before today. If Mike dies... She held the Coke bottle to the middle of her forehead as if trying to soothe a headache. When Mike dies, the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of them all. They'd be too much temptation. Mike wouldn't want... No, of course not. I know that. But it's not all about him. If I could believe like my holy hat father that I was going to find Mike waiting outside the Golden Gates to show me in after I die, that would be one thing. But I don't. I tried my ass off to believe that when I was a little girl, and I couldn't. God in heaven lasted about 4 years longer than the Tooth Fairy, but in the end, I couldn't. I think there's just darkness. No thought, no memory, no love. Just darkness. Oblivion. That's why I find what's happening to him so hard to accept. Mike knows it's more than oblivion, I said. What? Why? Why do you think that? Because she was there. He saw her and he saw her go because she said thank you. And I know because I saw the Alice band, and Tom saw her. Ask him, I said, but not today. She put her Coke aside and studied me. She was wearing the little smile that put dimples at the corners of her mouth. You've had seconds. I don't suppose you'd be interested in thirds. I put my Coke down beside the bed. As a matter of fact, she held out her arms. The first time was embarrassing. The second time was good. The third, man, the third time was a charm. I waited in the parlor while Annie dressed. When she came downstairs, she was back in her jeans and sweater. I thought of the blue bra just beneath the sweater, and damned if I didn't feel that stirring again. Are we good? she said. Yes, but I wish we could be even better. I wish that too. But this is as good as it's ever going to get. If you like me as much as I like you, you'll accept that. Can you? Yes. Good. How much longer will you and Mike be here? If the place doesn't blow away tonight, you mean? It won't. A week. Mike's got a round of specialists back in Chicago starting on the 17th, and I want to get settled before then. She drew in a deep breath and talked to his grandpa about a visit. There'll have to be some ground rules, no Jesus for one. Will I see you again before you leave? Yes. She put her arms around me and kissed me. Then she stepped away. But not like this. It would confuse things too much. I know you get that. I nodded. I got it. You better go now, Dev. And thank you. It was lovely. We saved the best ride for last, didn't we? That was true. Not a dark ride, but a bright one. I wish I could do more. For you. For Mike. So do I, she said. But that's not the world we live in. Come by tomorrow for supper if the storm's not too bad. Mike would love to see you. She looked beautiful, standing there barefooted in her faded jeans. I wanted to take her in my arms and lift her and carry her into some brilliant, untroubled future. Instead, I left her where she was. That's not the world we live in, she'd said. And how right she was. How right she was. About 100 yards down Beach Row, on the inland side of the two-lane, there was a little cluster of shops too tony to be called a strip mall. A gourmet grocery, a salon called Hare's Looking at You, a drugstore, a branch of the Southern Trust, and a restaurant called Mi Casa, where the Beach Row elite no doubt met to eat. I didn't give those shops so much as a glance when I drove back to Heaven's Bay and Mrs. Shoplaw's. If ever I needed proof that I didn't have the gift that Mike Ross and Rosie Gold shared, that was it. Go to bed early, Fred Dean had told me, and I did. I lay on my back with my hands behind my head, listening to the waves as I had all summer long, remembering the touch of her hands, the firmness of her breasts, the taste of her mouth. Mostly it was her eyes I thought about, and the fan of her hair on the pillow. I didn't love her the way I loved Wendy. That sort of love so strong and stupid only comes once. But I loved her. I did then, and I still do now. For her kindness, mostly, and her patience. Some young man somewhere may have had a better initiation into the mysteries of sex, but no young man ever had a sweeter one. Eventually, I slept. It was a banging shutter somewhere below that woke me. I picked my watch up from the night table and saw it was 1:15. I didn't think there was going to be any more sleep for me until that banging stopped, so I got dressed, started out the door, and then returned to the closet for my slicker. When I got downstairs, I paused. From the big bedroom down the hall from the parlor, I could hear Mrs. S. sawing wood in long, noisy strokes. No banging shutter was going to break her rest. It turned out I didn't need the slicker, at least not yet, because the rain hadn't started. The wind was strong, though. It had to be blowing 25 already. The low, steady thud of the surf had become a muted roar. I wondered if the weather boffins had underestimated Gilda, thought of Annie and Mike in the house down the beach, and felt a tickle of unease. I found the loose shutter and refastened it with the hook and eye. I let myself back in, went upstairs, undressed, and lay down again. This time, sleep wouldn't come. The shutter was quiet, but there was nothing I could do about the wind moaning around the eaves and rising to a low scream each time it gusted. Nor could I turn off my brain now that it was running again. It's not white, I thought. That meant nothing to me, but it wanted to mean something. It wanted to connect with something I had seen at the park during our visit. There is a shadow over me. That had been Rosie Gold on the day that I'd met her. I wondered how long she had worked at Joyland and where she had worked before. Was she Carney from Carney? And what did it matter? One of these children has the sight. They don't know which. I knew. Mike had seen Linda Gray and set her free. He had, as they say, shown her the door. The one she hadn't been able to find herself. Why else would she have thanked him? I closed my eyes and saw Fred at the shooting gallery, resplendent in his suit and magic top hat. I saw Lane holding out one of the 22s chained to the chump board. Annie. How many shots? Fred. 10 a clip, many as you want. Today's your day. My eyes flew open as several things came crashing together in my mind. I sat up, listening to the wind and the agitated surf. Then I turned on the overhead light and got Aaron's folder out of my desk drawer. I laid the photographs on the floor again, my heart pounding. The pics were good, but the light wasn't. I dressed for the second time, shoved everything back into the folder, and made another trip downstairs. A lamp hung above the Scrabble table in the middle of the parlor, and I knew from the many evenings I'd gotten my ass kicked that the light it cast was plenty bright. There were sliding doors between the parlor and the hall leading to Mrs. S.'s quarters. I pulled them shut so the light wouldn't disturb her. Then I turned on the lamp, moved the Scrabble box to the top of the TV, and laid my photos out. I was too agitated to sit down. I bent over the table instead, arranging and rearranging the photographs. I was about to do that for the third time when my hand froze. I saw it. I saw him. Not proof that would stand up in court, no, but enough for me. My knees came unhinged and I sat down after all. The phone I had used so many times to call my father, always noting down the time and duration on the guest call honor sheet when I was done, suddenly rang. Only in that windy early morning silence, it sounded more like a scream. I lunged at it and picked up the receiver before it could ring again. Hello? It was all I could manage. My heart was pounding too hard for more. It's you, the voice on the other end said. He sounded both amused and pleasantly surprised. I was expecting your landlady. I had a story about a family emergency already. I tried to speak. Couldn't. Devin? Teasing, cheerful. Are you there? Just a second. I held the phone to my chest, wondering. It's crazy how your mind can work when it's put under sudden stress. If he could hear my heart at his end of the line. On mine, I listened for Mrs. Shoplaw. I heard her, too, the muted sound of her continuing snores. It was a good thing I'd closed the parlor doors, and a better thing that there was no extension in her bedroom. I put the phone back to my ear and said, What do you want? Why are you calling? I think you know, Devin. And if you didn't, it's too late now, isn't it? Are you psychic, too? It was stupid. But right then my brain and my mouth seemed to be running on separate tracks. That's Razi, he said. Our Madame Fortuna. He actually laughed. He sounded relaxed, but I doubt if he was. Killers don't make phone calls in the middle of the night if they're relaxed, especially if they can't be sure of who's going to answer the phone. But he had a story, I thought. This guy's a Boy Scout. He's crazy, but he's always prepared. The tattoo, for instance, that's what takes your eye when you look at those photos. Not the face, not the baseball cap. I knew what you were up to, he said. I knew even before the girl brought you that folder. The one with the pictures in it. Then today, with the pretty mommy and the crippled kid. Have you told them, Devin? Did they help you work it out? They don't know anything. The wind gusted. I could hear it at his end, too, as if he were outside. I wonder if I can believe you. You can. You absolutely can. Looking down at the pictures. Tattoo man with his hand on Linda Gray's ass. Tattoo man helping her aim the rifle at the shooting gallery. Lane. Let's see your best Annie Oakley, Annie. Fred. A crack shot. Tattoo man in his fish-top cap and dark glasses and sandy blonde goatee. You could see the bird tattoo on his hand because the rawhide gloves had stayed in his back pocket until he and Linda Gray were in the horror house. Until he had her in the dark. I wonder, he said again. You were in that big old house for a long time this afternoon, Devin. Were you talking about the pictures the cook girl brought? Or were you just fucking her? Maybe it was both. Mommy's a tasty piece, all right. They don't know anything, I repeated. I was speaking low and fixing my gaze on the closed parlor doors. I kept expecting them to open and see Mrs. S. standing there in her nightgown, her face ghostly with cream. Neither do I. Not that I could prove. Probably not, but it would only be a matter of time. You can't unring the bell. Do you know that old saying? Sure. I didn't, but at that moment I would have agreed with him if he had declared that Bobby Rydell, a yearly performer at Joyland, was president. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to come to Joyland, and we'll talk this out. face to face, man to man. Why would I do that? That'd be pretty crazy if you're who I... Oh, you know who I am. He sounded impatient. And I know that if you went to the police, they'd find out I came on board at Joyland only a month or so after Linda Gray was killed. Then they'd put me with the Wellman Show and the Southern Star Amusements, and there goes the ballgame. So why don't I call them right now? Do you know where I am? Anger was creeping into his voice. No, venom. Do you know where I am right now, you nosy little son of a bitch? Joyland, probably in admin? Not at all. I'm at the shopping center on Beach Row, the one where the rich bitches go to buy their macrobiotics. Rich bitches like your girlfriend. A cold finger began to trace its course, its very slow course down the length of my spine from the nape of my neck to the crack of my ass. I said nothing. There's a payphone outside the drugstore. Not a booth, but that's okay because it isn't raining yet. Just windy. That's where I am. I can see your girlfriend's house from where I'm standing. There's a light on in the kitchen. Probably the one she leaves on all night. But the rest of the house is dark. I could hang up this phone and be there in 60 seconds. There's a burglar alarm. I didn't know if there was one or not. He laughed. At this point, do you think I give a shit? It won't stop me from cutting her throat. But first I'll make her watch me do it to the little cripple. You won't rape her, though, I thought. You wouldn't even if there was time. I don't think you can. I came close to saying it, but didn't. As scared as I was, I knew that goading him right now would be a very bad idea. You were so nice to them today, I said stupidly. Flowers, prizes, the rides. Yeah, all the rube shit. Tell me about the car that came popping out of the funhouse, Shy. What was that about? I don't know. I think you do. Maybe we'll discuss it. At Joyland. I know you're Ford, Jonesy. It's got the flickery left headlight and the cute little pinwheel on the antenna. If you don't want me in that house cutting throats, you're going to get in it right now, and you're going to drive down Beach Road to Joyland. Shut up when I am talking to you. When you pass the shopping center, you'll see me standing by one of the parked trucks. I'll give you 4 minutes to get here from the time I hang up the phone. If I don't see you, I'll kill the woman and the kid. You understand? Do you understand? Yes. I'll follow you to the park. Don't worry about the gate. It's already open. So you'll either kill me or them. I get to choose, is that it? Kill you? He sounded honestly surprised. I'm not going to kill you, Devin. That would only make my position worse. No, I'm going to do a fade. It won't be the first time and it probably won't be the last. What I want is to talk. I want to know how you got onto me. I could tell you that over the phone. He laughed. And spoil your chance to overpower me and be Howie the hero again? First the little girl, then Eddie Parks, and the pretty mommy and her crippled up brat for the exciting climax. How could you pass that up? He stopped laughing. 4 minutes. He hung up. I stared down at the glossy photos. I opened the drawer in the Scrabble table, took out one of the pads, and fumbled for the mechanical pencil Tina Ackerley always insisted on using to keep score. I wrote, Mrs. S., if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I know who killed Linda Gray. Others too. I wrote his name in capital letters. Then I ran for the door. My Ford starter spun and sputtered and did not catch. Then it began to slow. All summer I'd been telling myself I had to get a new battery, and all summer I found other things to spend my money on. My father's voice. You're flooding it, Devin. I took my foot off the gas and sat there in the dark. Time seemed to be racing. Part of me wanted to run back inside and call the police. I couldn't call Annie because I didn't have her fucking phone number, and given her famous father it would be unlisted. Did he know that? Probably not, but he had the luck of the devil. As brazen as he was, the murdering son of a bitch should have been caught 3 or 4 times already, but he hadn't been, because he had the luck of the devil. She'll hear him breaking in and she'll shoot him. Only the guns were in the safe, she said so. Even if she got one, she'd probably find the bastard holding his straight razor to Mike's throat when she confronted him. I turned the key again, and with my foot off the accelerator and the carb full of gas, my Ford started up at once. I backed down the driveway and turned toward Joyland. The circular red neon of the spin and the blue neon swoops of the Thunderball stood out against the low, fast-running clouds. Those two rides were always lit on stormy nights, partly as a beacon for ships at sea, partly to warn away any low-flying small aircraft bound for the Parrish County Airport. Beach Row was deserted. Sheets of sand blew across it with every gust of wind, some of those gusts strong enough to shake my car. Dunelets were already starting to build up on the macadam. In my headlights, they looked like skeleton fingers. When I passed the shopping center, I saw a single figure standing in the middle of the parking lot next to one of the Joyland maintenance trucks. He raised a hand to me as I went past and gave a single solemn wave. The big Victorian on the beachside came next. There was a light on in the kitchen. I thought it was the fluorescent over the sink. I remembered Annie coming into the room with her sweater in her hand, her tan stomach, the bra almost the same color as her jeans. "Would you like to go upstairs with me, Devin?" Lights bloomed in my rearview mirror and pulled up close. He was using his brights and I couldn't see the vehicle behind them, but I didn't have to. I knew it was the maintenance truck, just as I knew he had been lying when he said he wasn't going to kill me. The note I'd left for Mrs. Shoplaw would still be there in the morning. She would read it, and the name I had written there. The question was how long it would take her to believe it. He was such a charmer, him with his rhyming patter, winning smile, and cocked derby lid. Why, all the women loved Lane Hardy. The gates were open, as promised. I drove through them and tried to park in front of the now shuttered shooting gallery. He gave his horn a brief blip and flashed his lights. Drive on. When I got to the spin, he flashed his lights again. I turned off my Ford, very aware that I might never start it again. The hoister's red neon cast a blood-colored light over the dashboard, the seats, my own skin. The truck's headlights went out. I heard the door open and shut, and I heard the wind blowing through the spin's struts. Tonight that sound was a harpy's screech. There was a steady, almost syncopated rattling sound as well. The wheel was shaking on its tree-thick axle. The Gray Girls Killer, and Dee Dee Mowbrays, and Claudine Sharps, and Darlene Stamnackers walked to my car and tapped on the window with the barrel of a pistol. With the other hand, he made a beckoning gesture. I opened the door and got out. "You said you weren't going to kill me." It sounded as weak as my legs felt. Lane smiled his charming smile. "Well, we'll see which way the flow's going to go, won't we?" Tonight his derby was cocked to the left and pulled down tight so it wouldn't fly off. His hair, let loose from its workday ponytail, blew around his neck. The wind gusted and the spin gave an unhappy screech. The red glow of the neon flickered across his face as it shook. "Don't worry about the hoister," he said. "If it was solid, it might blow over, but the wind shoots right through the struts. You've got other things to worry about. Tell me about the funhouse car. That's what I really want to know. How did you do that? Was it some kind of remote gadget? I'm very interested in those things. They're the wave of the future, that's what I think." "There was no gadget." He didn't seem to hear me. "Also, what was the point? Was it supposed to flush me out? If it was, you didn't need to bother. I was already flushed." "She did it," I said. I didn't know if that was strictly true, but I had no intention of bringing Mike into the conversation. "Linda Gray. Didn't you see her?" The smile died. "Is that the best you can manage? The old ghost in the funhouse story? You'll have to do a little better than that." So he hadn't seen her any more than I had, but I think he knew there was something. I'll never know for sure, but I think that's why he offered to go after Milo. He hadn't wanted us anywhere near the horror house. "Oh, she was there. I saw her headband. Remember me looking in? It was under the seat." He lashed out so suddenly I didn't even have a chance to get my hand up. The barrel of the gun slammed across my forehead, opening a gash. I saw stars. Then blood poured into my eyes, and I saw only that. I staggered back against the rail beside the ramp leading to the spin and gripped it to keep me from falling down. I swiped at my face with the sleeve of my slicker. "I don't know why you'd bother to try to spook me with a campfire story at this late date," he said, "and I don't appreciate it. You know about the headband because there was a picture of it in the folder your nosy college cunt girlfriend brought you." He smiled. There was nothing charming about this one. It was all teeth.
Don't kid a kidder, kiddo.
But you didn't see the folder. The answer to that one was a simple deduction, even with my head ringing. Fred saw it, and told you, didn't he?
Yep, on Monday. We were having lunch together in his office. He said that you and the college cunt were playing Hardy Boys, although he didn't quite put it that way. He thought it was sort of cute. I didn't, because I'd seen you stripping off Eddie Park's gloves after he had his heart attack. That's when I knew you were playing Hardy Boys. That folder? Fred said the cunt had pages of notes. I knew it was only a matter of time before she put me with Wellman's and Southern Star.
I had an alarming picture of Lane Hardy riding the train to Annandale with a straight razor in his pocket. Aaron doesn't know anything.
Oh, relax. You think I'm going to go after her? Apply some strain and use your brain, and take a little stroll while you do it. Up the ramp, champ. You and I are going for a ride. Up there, where the air is rare.
I started to ask him if he was crazy, but that would have been a sort of stupid question at this late date, wouldn't it?
What have you got to grin about, Jonesy?
Nothing, I said.
You don't really want to go up with the wind blowing like this, do you?
But the spin's engine was running. I hadn't been aware of it over the wind, the surf, and the eerie scream of the ride itself. But now that I was listening, I heard it, a steady rumble, almost a purr. Something fairly obvious came to me. He was probably planning to turn the gun on himself after he finished with me. Maybe you think that should have occurred to me sooner because crazy people have a way of doing that. You read about it in the paper all the time. Maybe you'd be right, but I was under a lot of stress.
Old Carolina's safe as houses, he said. I'd go up in her if the wind was blowing 60 instead of just 30. It blew at least that hard when Carla skimmed past the coast 2 years ago, and she was just fine.
How are you going to put it in gear if we're both in the car?
Get in and see. Or, he lifted the gun, or I can shoot you right here. I'm good with it either way.
I walked up the ramp, opened the door of the car currently sitting at the loading station, and started to climb in.
No, he said. You want to be on the outside. Better view. Stand aside, Clyde, and put your hands in your pockets.
Lane sidled past me, the gun leveled. More blood was trickling into my eyes and down my cheeks, but I didn't dare take a hand from my slicker pocket to wipe it off. I could see how white his finger was on the trigger of the pistol. He sat down on the inside of the car.
Now you.
I got in. I didn't see any choice.
And close the door. That's what it's there for.
You sound like Dr. Seuss, I said. He grinned.
Flattery will get you nowhere. Close the door or I'll put a bullet in your knee. You think anyone will hear it over this wind? I don't.
I closed the door. When I looked at him again, he had the pistol in one hand and the square metal gadget in the other. It had a stubby antenna.
Told you I love these gadgets. This one's your basic garage door opener with a couple of small modifications. Sends a radio signal. Showed it to Mr. Easterbrook this spring. Told him it was the perfect thing for wheel maintenance when there wasn't a greenie or a gazoonie around to run the groundside controls. He said I couldn't use it because it hadn't been safety approved by the State Commission. Cautious old son of a bitch. I was going to patent it. Too late now, I guess. Take it.
I took it. It was the garage door opener. A genie. My dad had one almost exactly like it.
See the button with the up arrow?
Yes.
Push it.
I put my thumb on the button, but didn't push it. The wind was strong down here, how much stronger up there where the air was rare. We're flying, Mike had shouted.
Push it, or take one in the knee, Jonesy.
I pushed the button. The spin's motor geared down at once, and our car began to rise.
Now throw it over the side.
What?
Throw it over the side, or you get one in the knee and you'll never two-step again. I'll give you a 3 count. 1, 2.
I threw his controller over the side. The wheel rose and rose into the windy night. To my right, I could see the waves pounding in, their crests marked by foam so white it looked phosphorescent. On the left, the land was dark and sleeping. Not a single set of headlights moved on Beach Row. The wind gusted. My blood-sticky hair flew back from my forehead in clumps. The car rocked. Lane threw himself forward, then back, making the car rock more. But the gun, now pointed at my side, never wavered. Red neon skimmed lines across the barrel. He shouted, "Not so much like a grandma ride tonight, is it, Jonesy?"
It sure wasn't. Tonight, the state-old Carolina spin was terrifying. As we reached the top, a savage gust shook the wheels so hard I heard our car rattling on the steel supports that held it. Lane's derby flew off into the night. Shit! Well, there's always another one. Lane, how are we going to get off? The question rose behind my lips, but I didn't ask. I was too afraid he'd tell me we weren't. That if the storm didn't blow the spin over and if the power didn't go out, we'd still be going around and around when Fred got here in the morning. 2 dead men on Joyland's chump hoister, which made my next move rather obvious. Lane was smiling. You want to try for the gun, don't you? I can see it in your eyes. Well, it's like Dirty Harry said in that movie. You have to ask yourself if you feel lucky. We were going down, the car still rocking, but not quite so much. I decided I didn't feel lucky at all. How many have you killed, Lane? None of your fucking business. And since I have the gun, I think I should get to ask the questions. How long have you known? Quite a while, right? At least since the college cunt showed you the pictures. You just held off so the cripple could get his day at the park. Your mistake, Jonesy. A rube's mistake. I only figured it out tonight, I said. Liar, liar, pants on fire. We swept past the ramp and started up again. I thought, he's probably going to shoot me when the car's at the top. Then he'll either shoot himself or push me out, slide over, and jump onto the ramp when the car comes back down. Take his chances on not breaking a leg or a collarbone. I was betting on the murder-suicide scenario, but not until his curiosity was satisfied. I said, call me stupid if you want, but don't call me a liar. I kept looking at the pictures and I kept seeing something in them, something familiar. But until tonight, I couldn't quite figure out what it was. It was the hat. You were wearing a fish-top baseball cap in the photos, not a derby, but it was tilted one way when you and the gray girl were at the Whirly Cups and the other when you were at the shooting gallery. I looked at the rest, the ones where the 2 of you were only in the background, and saw the same thing, back and forth, back and forth. You do it all the time. You don't even think about it. That's all? A fucking tilted cap? No. We were reaching the top for the second time, but I thought I was good for at least one more turn. He wanted to hear this. Then the rain started, a hard squall that turned on like a shower spigot. At least it'll wash the blood off my face, I thought. When I looked at him, I saw that wasn't all it was washing off. One day I saw you with your hat off, and I thought your hair was showing the first strands of white. I was almost yelling to be heard over the wind and the rush of the rain. It was coming sideways, hitting us in the face. Yesterday I saw you wiping the back of your neck. I thought it was dirt, and then tonight after I got the thing about the cap, I started thinking about the fake bird tattoo. Aaron saw how the sweat made it run. I guess the cops missed that. I could see my car and the maintenance truck growing larger as the spin neared the bottom of its circle for the second time. Beyond them, something large, a wind-loosened swatch of canvas maybe, was blowing up Joyland Avenue. It wasn't dirt you were wiping off, it was dye. It was running like the tattoo ran, like it's running now. It's all over your neck. It wasn't strands of white hair I saw, it was strands of blonde. He wiped his neck and looked at the black smear on his palm. I almost went for him then, but he raised the gun, and all at once I was looking into a black eye. It was small, but terrible. I used to be blonde, he said, but under the black I'm mostly gray now. I've lived a stressful life, Jonesy. He smiled ruefully as though this were some sad joke we were both in on. We were going up again, and I had just a moment to think that the thing I'd seen blowing up the midway, what I had taken for a big square of loose canvas, could have been a car with its headlights out. It was crazy to hope, but I hoped anyway. The rain slashed at us. My slicker rippled. Lane's hair flew like a ragged flag. I hoped I could keep him from pulling the trigger for at least one more spin. Maybe 2. Possible, but not probable. Once I let myself think of you as Linda Gray's killer, and it wasn't easy, Lane. Not after the way you took me in and showed me the ropes. I could see past the hat and sunglasses and face hair. I could see you. You weren't working here. I was running a forklift in a warehouse in Florence. He wrinkled his nose. Rube work. I hated it. You were working in Florence. You met Linda Gray in Florence. But you knew all about Joyland over here in North Carolina, didn't you? I don't know if you're Carney from Carney, but you've never been able to stay away from the shows. And when you suggested a little road trip, she went along with it. I was her secret boyfriend. I told her I had to be because I was older. He smiled. She bought it. They all do. You'd be surprised how much the young ones will buy. You sick fuck, I thought. You sick, sick fuck. You brought her to Heaven's Bay, you stayed at a motel, and then you killed her here at Joyland, even though you must have known about the Hollywood girls running around with their cameras. Bold as brass. That was part of the kick, wasn't it? Sure it was. You did it on a ride full of conies. Rubes, he said. The hardest gust yet shook the spin, but he seemed not to feel it. Of course, he was on the inside of the wheel where things were a little calmer. Call them what they are. They're just rubes, all of them. They see nothing. It's like their eyes are connected to their assholes instead of their brains. Everything goes right through. You get off on risk, don't you? That's why you came back and hired on. Not even a month later. His smile widened. All this time I've been right here under their noses. And you know what? I've been, good, ever since that night in the funhouse. All the bad stuff was behind me. I could have gone on being good. I like it here. I was building a life. I had my gadget and I was going to patent it. Oh, I think sooner or later you would have done it again. We were back at the top. The wind and rain pelted us. I was shivering. My clothes were soaked. Lane's cheeks were dark with hair dye. It ran down his skin in tendrils. His mind is like that, I thought. On the inside where he never smiles. No, I was cured. I have to do you, Jonesy, but only because you stuck your nose in where it doesn't belong. It's too bad because I liked you. I really did. I thought he was telling the truth, which made what was happening even more horrible. We were going back down. The world below was windy and rain-soaked. There had been no car with its headlights out. Only a blowing piece of canvas that for a moment looked like that to my yearning mind. The cavalry wasn't coming. Thinking it would only get me killed. I had to do this myself, and the only chance I had was to make him mad. Really mad. You get off on risk, but you don't get off on rape, do you? If you did, you would have taken them to some isolated place. I think what your secret girlfriends have between their legs scares you limp. What do you do later? Lie in bed and jack off thinking about how brave you are killing defenseless girls? Shut up! You can fascinate them, but you can't fuck them. The wind shouted. The car rocked. I was going to die, and at that moment I didn't give shit one. I didn't know how angry I was making him, but I was angry enough for the both of us. What happened to make you this way? Did your mother put a clothespin on your pee-pee when you went wee-wee in the corner? Did Uncle Stan make you give him a blowjob, or was it... Shut up! He rose into a crouch, gripping the safety bar in one hand and pointing the gun at me with the other. A stroke of lightning lit him up. Staring eyes, lank hair, working mouth, and the gun. Shut your dirty mouth! Devin, duck! I didn't think about it. I just did it. There was a whip-crack report, an almost liquid sound in the blowing night. The bullet must have gone right past me, but I didn't hear it or feel it the way characters do in books. The car we were in swept past the loading point, and I saw Annie Ross standing on the ramp with a rifle in her hands. The van was behind her. Her hair was blowing around her bone-white face. We started up again. I looked at Lane. He was frozen in his crouch, his mouth ajar. Black dye ran down his cheeks. His eyes were rolled up so only the bottom half of the irises showed. Most of his nose was gone. One nostril hung down by his upper lip, but the rest of it was just a red ruin surrounding a black hole the size of a dime. He sat down on the seat, hard. Several of his front teeth rattled out of his mouth when he did. I plucked the gun from his hand and tossed it over the side. What I was feeling right then was nothing, except in some very deep part of me where I had begun to realize that this might not be my night to die after all. Oh, he said. Then he said, Then he slumped forward, chin on chest. He looked like a man considering his options, and very carefully. There was more lightning as the car reached the top. It illuminated my seatmate in a stutter of blue fire. The wind blew and the spin moaned in protest. We were coming down again. From below, almost lost in the storm. Dev, how do I stop it? I first thought of telling her to look for the remote control gadget, but in the storm she could hunt for a half an hour and still not find it. Even if she did, it might be broken or lying shorted out in a puddle. Besides, there was a better way. "Go to the motor!" I shouted. "Look for the red button! Red button, Annie! It's the emergency stop!" I swept past her, registering the same jeans and sweater she had worn earlier, both now soaked and plastered to her. No jacket, no hat. She had come in a hurry, and I knew who had sent her. How much simpler it would have been if Mike had focused on Lane at the start. But Rosie never had, even though she had known him for years, and I was to find out later that Mike never focused on Lane Hardy at all. I was going back up again. Beside me, Lane's soaking hair was dripping black rain into his lap. "Wait until I come back down!" "What?" I didn't bother trying again. The wind would have drowned it out. I could only hope she wouldn't hammer on the red button while I was at the top of the ride. As the car rose into the worst of the storm, the lightning flashed again, and this time there was an accompanying crack of thunder. As if it had roused him. Perhaps it had. Lane lifted his head and looked at me. Tried to look at me. His eyes had come back level in their sockets, but were now pointing in opposite directions. That terrible image has never left my mind, and it still comes to me at the oddest times. Going through the turnpike toll booths, drinking a cup of coffee in the morning with the CNN anchors baying bad news, getting up to piss at 3 a.m., which some poet or other has rightly dubbed as the hour of the wolf. He opened his mouth and blood poured out. He made a grinding insectal sound like a cicada burrowing into a tree. A spasm shook him. His feet tap-danced briefly on the steel floor of the car. They stilled, and his head dropped forward again. Be dead, I thought. Please be dead this time. As the spin started down again, a bolt of lightning struck the thunderball. I saw the tracks light up briefly. I thought, that could have been me. The hardest gust of wind yet struck the car. I held on for dear life. Lane flopped like a big doll. I looked down at Annie, her face white, staring up, her eyes squinted against the rain. She was inside the rail, standing next to the motor. So far, so good. I put my hands around my mouth. "The red button! I see it! Wait until I tell you!" The ground was coming up. I grabbed the bar when the late, at least I hoped he was, Lane Hardy was at the control stick. The spin always came to an easy halt, the cars up top swaying gently. I had no idea what an emergency stop would be like, but I was going to find out. "Now, Annie! Push it now!" It was a good thing I was holding on. My car stopped dead about 10 feet from the unloading point and still 5 feet above the ground. The car tilted. Lane was thrown forward, his head and torso flopping over the bar. Without thinking, I grabbed his shirt and pulled him back. One of his hands flopped into my lap, and I flung it away with a grunt of disgust. The bar wouldn't unlock, so I had to wriggle out from beneath it. "Be careful, Dev!" Annie was standing beside the car, holding up her hands as if to catch me. She had propped the rifle she used to end Hardy's life against the motor housing. "Step back," I said, and threw one leg over the side of the car. More lightning flashed. The wind howled and the spin howled back. I got hold of a strut and swung out. My hands slipped on the wet metal and I dropped. I went to my knees. A moment later, she was pulling me to my feet. "Are you all right?" "Yes." I wasn't, though. The world was swimming and I was on the edge of a faint. I lowered my head, gripped my legs just above my knees, and began taking deep breaths. For a moment it could have gone either way, but then things began to solidify. I stood up again, careful not to move fast. It was hard to tell with the rain bucketing down, but I was pretty sure she was crying. I had to do it. He was going to kill you, wasn't he? Please, Dev, say he was going to kill you. Mike said he wasn't. You can quit worrying about that, believe me, and I wouldn't have been the first. He's killed 4 women. I thought of Aaron's speculation about the years when there had been no bodies, none discovered at least. Maybe more, probably more. We have to call the police, there's a phone in... I started to point towards Mysterio's mirror mansion, but she grabbed my arm. "No, you can't, not yet." "Annie." She thrust her face close to mine, almost kissing distance, but kissing was the last thing on her mind. "How did I get here? Am I supposed to tell the police that a ghost showed up in my son's room in the middle of the night and told him you'd die on the Ferris wheel if I didn't come? Mike can't be a part of this, and if you tell me I'm being an overprotective mom, I'll kill you myself." "No," I said. "I won't tell you that. So how did I get here?" At first I didn't know. You have to remember that I was still scared myself. Only scared doesn't cover it. Scared isn't even in the ballpark. I was in shock. Instead of Mysterios, I led her to her van and helped her sit behind the wheel. Then I went around and got in on the passenger side. By then, I had an idea. It had the virtue of simplicity, and I thought it would fly. I shut the door and took my wallet out of my hip pocket. I almost dropped it on the floor when I opened it. I was shaking like crazy. Inside, there were plenty of things to write on, but I had nothing to write with. Please tell me you have a pen or a pencil, Annie. Maybe in the glove compartment. You'll have to call the police, Dev. I have to get back to Mike. If they arrest me for leaving the scene or something, or for murder. Nobody's going to arrest you, Annie. You saved my life. I was pawing through the glove compartment as I talked. There was an owner's manual, piles of gasoline credit card receipts, Rolaids, a bag of M&Ms, even a Jehovah's Witness pamphlet asking if I knew where I was going to spend the afterlife. But no pen or pencil. You can't wait. In a situation like that, that's what I was always told. Her words came in chunks because her teeth were chattering. Just aim and squeeze before you can, second guess yourself. It was supposed to go between his eyes, but the wind, I guess the wind. She shot out a hand and gripped my shoulder hard enough to hurt. Her eyes were huge. Did I hit you too, Dev? There's a gash in your forehead and blood on your shirt. You didn't hit me. He pistol whipped me a little, that's all. Annie, there's nothing in here to write with. But there was. A ballpoint at the very back of the glove compartment. Printed on the barrel, faded but still legible, was "Let's Go Krogering." I won't say that pen saved Annie and Mike Ross serious police trouble, but I know it saved them a lot of questions about what had brought Annie to Joyland on such a dark and stormy night. I passed her the pen and a business card from my wallet, blank side up. Earlier, sitting in my car and terribly afraid that my failure to buy a new battery was going to get Annie and Mike killed, I thought I'd go back into the house and call her, only I didn't have her number. Now, I told her to write it down. And below the number, write, "Call if plans change." While she did, I started the van's engine and turned the heater on full blast. She returned the card. I tucked it into my wallet and shoved the wallet back into my pocket and tossed the pen into the glove compartment. I took her in my arms and kissed her cold cheek. Her trembling didn't stop, but it eased. "You saved my life," I said. "Now let's make sure nothing happens to you or Mike because you did. Listen very carefully." She listened. 6 days later, Indian Summer came back to Heaven's Bay for a brief final fling. It was perfect weather for a noon meal at the end of the Ross Boardwalk, only we couldn't go there. Newsmen and photographers had it staked out. They could do that because, unlike the 2 acres surrounding the Big Green Victorian, the beach was public property. The story of how Annie had taken out Lane Hardy, known then and forever after as the Carney Killer, with one shot had gone nationwide. Not that the stories were bad, quite the opposite. The Wilmington paper had led with, "Daughter of evangelist Buddy Ross bags Carney Killer." The New York Post was more succinct. "Hero Mom." It helped that there were file photos from Annie's salad days where she looked not just gorgeous, but smoking hot. Inside View, the most popular of the supermarket tabloids back then, put out an extra edition. They had unearthed the photo of Annie at 17, taken after a shooting competition at Camp Perry. Clad in tight jeans, an NRA t-shirt, and cowboy boots, she was standing with an antique Purdy shotgun broken over one arm and holding up a blue ribbon in her free hand. Next to the smiling girl was a mugshot of Lane Hardy at 21, after an arrest in San Diego under his real name, which was Leonard Hopgood, for indecent exposure. The 2 pics made a terrific contrast. The headline, "Beauty and the Beast." Being a minor hero myself, I got some mention in the North Carolina papers, but in the tabloids, I was hardly mentioned. Not sexy enough, I guess. Mike thought having a hero mom was cool. Annie loathed the whole circus and couldn't wait for the press to move on to the next big thing. She had gotten all the newspaper coverage she wanted in the days when she had been the holy man's wild child, famous for dancing on bars and various Greenwich Village dives. So she gave no interviews, and we had our farewell picnic in the kitchen. There were actually 5 of us, because Milo was under the table, hoping for scraps, and Jesus, on the face of Mike's kite, was propped in the extra chair. Their bags were in the hall. When the meal was done, I would drive them to Wilmington International. A private jet laid on by Buddy Ross Ministries, Inc. would fly them to Chicago and out of my life. The Heavens Bay Police Department, not to mention the North Carolina State Police and maybe even the FBI, would undoubtedly have more questions for her, and she'd probably be back at some point to testify before a grand jury, but she'd be fine. She was the hero mom, and thanks to the promotional pen from Kroger's in the back of the van's glove compartment, there would never be a photo of Mike in the post below a headline reading, Psychic Savior. Our story was simple, and Mike played no part in it. I had gotten interested in the murder of Linda Gray because of the legend that her ghost haunted the Joyland funhouse. I had enlisted the help of my research-minded friend and summer co-worker Aaron Cook. The photographs of Linda Gray and her killer had reminded me of someone, but it wasn't until after Mike's day at Joyland that the penny dropped. Before I could call the police, Lane Hardy had called me, threatening to kill Annie and Mike if I didn't come to Joyland on the double. So much truth, and only one little lie. I had Annie's phone number so I could call her if plans for Mike's visit to the park changed. I produced the card for the lead detective, who barely glanced at it. I said I called Annie from Mrs. Shoplaw's before leaving for Joyland, telling her to lock her doors, call the cops, and stay put. She did lock the doors, but didn't stay put. Nor did she call the police. She was terrified that if Hardy saw blue flashing lights, he'd kill me, so she'd taken one of the guns from the safe and followed Lane with her headlights off, hoping to surprise him, which she did. Thus, hero mom. "How's your father taking all this, Dev?" Annie asked. "Aside from saying he'd come to Chicago and wash your cars for life if you wanted?" She laughed, but my father had actually said that. "He's fine. I'm heading back to New Hampshire next month. We'll have Thanksgiving together. Fred asked me to stay on until then, help him get the park buttoned up, and I agreed. I could still use the money." "For school?" "Yeah. I guess I'll go back for the spring semester. Dad's sending me an application." "Good. That's where you need to be, not painting rides and replacing light bulbs in an amusement park." "You'll really come see us in Chicago, right?" Mike asked. "Before I get too sick?" Annie stirred uneasily but said nothing. "I have to," I said and pointed to the kite. "How else am I going to return that? You said it was just a loan." "Maybe you'll get to meet my grandpa. Other than being crazy about Jesus, he's pretty cool." He gave his mother a sideways glance. "I think so, anyway. He's got this great electric train set in his basement." I said, "Your grandfather may not want to see me, Mike. I almost got your mother in a whole peck of trouble." "He'll know you didn't mean to. It wasn't your fault that you worked with that guy." Mike's face grew troubled. He put down his sandwich, picked up a napkin, and coughed into it. "Mr. Hardy seemed really nice. He took us on the rides." A lot of girls thought he was really nice, too, I thought. "You never had a vibe about him?" Mike shook his head and coughed some more. "No. I liked him, and I thought he liked me." I thought of Lane on the Carolina Spin, calling Mike a crippled brat. Annie put a hand on Mike's wand of a neck and said, "Some people hide their real faces, hon. Sometimes you can tell when they're wearing masks, but not always. Even people with powerful intuitions can get fooled." I had come for lunch and to take them to the airport and to say goodbye, but I had another reason as well. "I want to ask you something, Mike. It's about the ghost who woke you up and told you I was in trouble at the park. Is that okay? Will it upset you?" "No. But it's not like on TV. There wasn't any white see-through thing floating around going, woo. I just woke up, and the ghost was there, sitting on my bed like a real person." "I wish you wouldn't talk about this," Annie said. "Maybe it's not upsetting him, but it's sure as hell upsetting me. I just have one more question, and then I'll let it go." "Fine." She began to clear the table. Tuesday we had taken Mike to Joyland. Not long after midnight on Wednesday morning, Annie had shot Lane Hardy on the Carolina Spin, ending his life and saving mine. The next day had been taken up by police interviews and dodging reporters. Then on Thursday afternoon, Fred Dean had come to see me, and his visit had nothing to do with Lane Hardy's death, except I thought it did. "Here's what I want to know, Mike. Was it the girl from the funhouse? Was she the one who came and sat on your bed?" Mike's eyes went wide. "Gosh, no. She's gone. When they go, I don't think they ever come back. It was a guy." In 1991, shortly after his 63rd birthday, my father suffered a fairly serious heart attack. He spent a week in Portsmouth General Hospital and then was sent home, with stern warnings about watching his diet, losing 20 pounds, and cutting out the evening cigar. He was one of those rare fellows who actually followed the doctor's orders. And at this writing, he's 85 and, except for a bad hip and dimming eyesight, still good to go. In 1973, things were different. According to my new research assistant, Google Chrome, the average stay back then was 2 weeks. The first in ICU, the second on the cardiac recovery floor. Eddie Parks must have done okay in ICU, because while Mike was touring Joyland on that Tuesday, Eddie was being moved downstairs. That was when he had the second heart attack. He died in the elevator. "What did he say to you?" I asked Mike. "That I had to wake up my mom and make her go to the park right away or a bad man was going to kill you." Had this warning come while I was still on the phone with Lane in Mrs. Shoplaw's parlor? It couldn't have come much later, or Annie wouldn't have made it in time. I asked, but Mike didn't know. As soon as the ghost went, that was the word Mike used, it didn't disappear, didn't walk out the door or use the window. It just went. He had thumbed the intercom beside his bed. When Annie answered his buzz, he started screaming. "That's enough," Annie said in a tone that brooked no refusal. She was standing by the sink with her hands on her hips. "I don't mind, Mom." Cough, cough. "Really?" Cough, cough, cough. "She's right," I said. "It's enough." Did Eddie appear to Mike because I saved the bad-tempered old geezer's life? It's hard to know anything about the motivation of those who've gone on, Rosie's phrase the Caps always implied by lifted and upturned palms, but I doubt it. His reprieve only lasted a week after all, and he sure didn't spend those last few days in the Caribbean being waited on by topless honeys. But I had come to visit him, and except for maybe Fred Dean, I was the only one who did. I even brought him a picture of his ex-wife. Sure, he'd called her a miserable, scolding, backbiting cunt, and maybe she was, but at least I'd made the effort. In the end, so had he, for whatever reason. As we drove to the airport, Mike leaned forward from the back seat and said, "You want to know something funny, Dev? He never once called you by name. He just called you the kiddo. I guess he figured I'd know who he meant." I guessed so, too. Eddie fucking Parks. Those are the things that happened once upon a time and long ago, in a magical year when oil sold for $11 a barrel. The year I got my damn heart broke. The year I lost my virginity. The year I saved a nice little girl from choking and a fairly nasty old man from dying of a heart attack. The first one, at least. The year a madman almost killed me on a Ferris wheel. The year I wanted to see a ghost and didn't, although I guess at least one of them saw me. That was also the year I learned to talk a secret language and how to dance the hokey pokey in a dog costume. The year I discovered that there are worse things than losing the girl. The year I was 21 and still a greenie. The world has given me a good life since then. I won't deny it, but sometimes I hate the world anyway. Dick Cheney, that apologist for waterboarding and for too long chief preacher in the holy church of whatever it takes, got a brand new heart while I was writing this. How about that? He lives on. Other people have died. Talented ones like Clarence Clemens. Smart ones like Steve Jobs. Decent ones like my old friend Tom Kennedy. Mostly you get used to it. You pretty much have to. As W.H. Auden pointed out, the reaper takes the rolling in money, the screamingly funny, and those who are very well hung. But that isn't where Auden starts his list. He starts with the innocent young, which brings us to Mike. I took a seedy, off-campus apartment when I went back to school for the spring semester. One chilly night in late March, as I was cooking a stir-fry for myself and this girl I was just about crazy for, the phone rang. I answered it in my usual jokey way. "Wormwood Arms, Devin Jones, proprietor." "Dev, it's Annie Ross." "Annie, wow! Hold on a second, just let me turn down the radio." Jennifer, the girl I was just about crazy for, gave me an inquiring look. I shot her a wink and a smile and picked up the phone. "I'll be there 2 days after spring break starts, and you can tell him that's a promise. I'm going to buy my ticket next week." "Dev, stop. Stop." I picked up on the dull sorrow in her voice, and all my happiness at hearing from her collapsed into dread. I put my forehead against the wall and closed my eyes. What I really wanted to close was the ear with the phone pressed to it. "Mike died last evening, Dev. Her voice wavered, then steadied. "He spiked a fever 2 days ago. The doctor said we ought to get him into the hospital. Just to be safe, he said. He seemed to be getting better yesterday, coughing less, sitting up and watching TV, talking about some big basketball tournament. Then, last night, she stopped. I could hear the rasp of her breath as she tried to get herself under control. I was also trying, but the tears had started. They were warm, almost hot. It was very sudden, she said. Then so softly I could barely hear. My heart is breaking. There was a hand on my shoulder, Jennifer's. I covered it with my own. I wondered who was in Chicago to put a hand on Annie's shoulder. Is your father there? On a crusade in Phoenix. He's coming tomorrow. Your brothers? George is here now. Phil's supposed to arrive on the last flight from Miami. George and I are at the place. The place where I can't watch it happen, even though it's what he wanted. She was crying hard now. I had no idea what she was talking about. Annie, what can I do? Anything at all. She told me. Let's end on a sunny day in April of 1974. Let's end on that short stretch of North Carolina beach that lies between the town of Heavens Bay and Joyland, an amusement park that would close its doors 2 years later. The big parks finally drove it to bankruptcy in spite of all Fred Dean's and Brenda Rafferty's efforts to save it. Let's end with a pretty woman in faded jeans and a young man in a University of New Hampshire sweatshirt. The young man is holding something in one hand. Lying at the end of the boardwalk with his snout on one paw is a Jack Russell Terrier who seems to have lost all his former bounce. On the picnic table, where the woman once served fruit smoothies, there's a ceramic urn. It looks sort of like a vase missing its bouquet. We're not quite ending where we began, but close enough. Close enough. I'm on the outs with my father again, Annie said, and this time there's no grandson to hold us together. When he got back from his damn crusade and found out that I had had Mike cremated, he was furious. She smiled wanly. If he hadn't stayed for that last goddamn revival, he might have talked me out of it. Probably would have. But it's what Mike wanted. Strange request for a kid, isn't it? But yes, he was very clear, and we both know why. Yes, we did. The last good time always comes, and when you see the darkness creeping towards you, you hold on to what was bright and good. You hold on for dear life. Did you even ask your dad to come? Actually, I did. It's what Mike would have wanted. Daddy refused to participate in what he called a pagan ceremony, and I'm glad. She took my hand. This is for us, Dev, because we were here when he was happy. I raised her hand to my lips, kissed it, gave it a brief squeeze, and let it go. He saved my life as much as you did, you know. If he hadn't woken you up, if he'd even hesitated, I know. Eddie couldn't have done anything for me without Mike. I don't see ghosts or hear them. Mike was a medium. This is hard, she said. Just so hard to let him go. Even the little bit that's left. Are you sure you want to go through with it? Yes. Well, I still can. She took the urn from the picnic table. Milo raised his head to look at it, then lowered it back to his paw. I don't know if he understood Mike's remains were inside, but he knew Mike was gone all right. That he knew damn well. I held out the Jesus kite with the back to her. There, as per Mike's instructions, I had taped a small pocket big enough to hold maybe half a cup of fine gray ash. I held it open while Annie tipped the urn. When the pocket was full, she planted the urn in the sand between her feet and held out her hands. I gave her the reel of twine and turned toward Joyland, where the Carolina spin dominated the horizon. I'm flying, he'd said that day, lifting his arms over his head. No braces to hold him down then, and none now. I believe that Mike was a lot wiser than his Christ-minded grandfather. Wiser than all of us, maybe. Was there ever a crippled kid who didn't want to fly, just once? I looked at Annie. She nodded that she was ready. I lifted the kite and let it go. It rose at once on a brisk, chilly breeze off the ocean. We followed its ascent with our eyes. You, she said, and held out her hands. This part is for you, Dev. He said so. I took the twine, feeling the pull as the kite, now alive, rose above us, nodding back and forth against the blue.
Annie picked up the urn and carried it down the sandy slope. I guess she dumped it there at the edge of the ocean, but I was watching the kite. And once I saw the thin gray streamer of ash running away from it, carried into the sky on the breeze, I let the string go free. I watched the untethered kite go up and up and up. Mike would have wanted to see how high it would go before it disappeared. And I did too. I wanted to see that too. August 24th, 2012.
Joyland was written by Stephen King and read by Michael Kelly. It was recorded at CBM Studios in New York City by Andrew Thomas and Ethan Donaldson. Editing and post-production by Frog Pond Productions. Terry Hogan was the mix engineer. The associate producer was Ben Rimmelauer. Joyland was produced and directed by Christina Zarafinidis. This has been a presentation of Simon & Schuster Audio. Also available from Simon & Schuster Audio, The Wind Through the Keyhole, written and read by Stephen King, and 11/22/63, written by Stephen King and read by Craig Wasson.